Isn't it about time for somebody's favorite radio program?
Yeah.
97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
Now, live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
A Thursday edition of the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Henning has the day off today. What's up, everybody? Holy moly, Thursday, no Phils tonight. No Phils tonight. What are we going to do with ourselves? You know, the Phils played yesterday afternoon, so no Phils last night, no Phils tonight. You know, the baseball team, especially a good baseball team. A good baseball team is about the best friend a sports fan can have. When you have a good baseball team, it's the best friend a sports fan can have. They're there for you every day. It's like them not being there last night and tonight. It's almost like that friend you have who, when you call them and say, hey, can you do something today in the summertime? And they say, it's my grandmother's birthday. I have to go to dinner tonight. And you're like, oh, we've all hung out every single day. You need to be here. Nah, my parents said I have to go to the dinner. That's the Phillies tonight. They're at the relative's birthday party dinner that everybody is forced to go to. And it just kind of puts a little, it takes you out of your routines. No Phils tonight. They'll open a 3-game set with the Arizona Diamondbacks at Citizens Bank Park tomorrow. It's a rematch of the National League Championship Series from 1 year ago. And it's really the series that has anybody who has pause about the Phillies and everything they've accomplished this year. And if you're skeptical at all, it's because of what happened against the Arizona Diamondbacks, right? If the Arizona Diamondbacks could come in here and win Game 6 and Game 7 last year, should I take what the Phillies are doing seriously this season? Should I say, hey, this team is clearly the best team. They're clearly better than everybody else. They're clearly better than they were last year. Or does the Arizona Diamondback Game 6 and Game 7 still linger in your mind? That's what I want to find out from you guys as we start this Thursday show. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Does that Arizona Diamondback loss in Game 6 and Game 7, does it still enter your mind with this team at 49-25, 29-11 at home? Because, quite frankly, right now, you are running out to get home field advantage. Does that matter? Because you'd say, well, you had home field advantage in the NLCS last year. You had Game 6 and Game 7. All you had to do was win one of them, and you couldn't get that done. Does that still kind of linger in the back of your mind or even in the front of your mind as you're watching this season kind of unfold? Or are you past that? Is what you're seeing right now a mirage, or is this, hey, I'm looking at a team that lost last year at home and is building off of that? Because for me, this series brings back those thoughts. And I know that series starts tomorrow, but as I kind of take a look at it and I think about this series this weekend, the first thing I think of is they came in here and won 2 games. You had Game 6 and Game 7 in a ballpark that everybody said, wow, what a home field advantage. The Phillies have a legitimate home field advantage. And all they had to do was win one, and they couldn't get the job done. Text board is open, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973, First text says, yeah, Mike, that lingers like cranberries. All right. Well, yeah, I listen, I agree. When you say to me, the Diamondbacks are in town, it's a rematch of the NLCS, and all I think about is I had to win one game at home, and I had this great home field advantage, and I couldn't get it done. And I look at the standings right now, and I say, okay, I'm 7 games up on Atlanta. I feel pretty good there. I'm going to make the playoffs. I feel pretty good there. My run differential is 101. I feel pretty good there. I'm winning 25 of my last 28 games at home. I feel pretty good there. But, man, that loss in Game 6 and Game 7, it still kind of lingers. So I guess as the Diamondbacks come in Friday, Saturday, Sunday to Citizens Bank Park, do you think about those games as well, or are you past them? Have you seen enough to think that this team is improved, better than the team that lost 2 games at home to end the season last year? Let me know, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973, because here's the thing. I know a lot of fans always have this thing, hey, the Sixers, they have scarred us for 8 years now. It's I'll believe it when they get out of the second round. The Sixers could win 70 games next year, but you'll only believe in them if they get out of the second round. Until that happens, nothing they could do will change your mind about them. What about the Phillies? They lost last year, Game 6, 5-1, and Game 7, they lost 4-2. They scored a grand total of 3 runs in the final 2 home games at Citizens Bank Park. 45,000 people showed up for both games. You had 90,000 people there for the final 2 games. They got treated to a 5-1 loss and a 4-2 loss. So can you overcome those 2 games with anything you see in this season? 609-403-0973. Luke in Atlantic City says, Mike, the Diamondbacks don't factor. It's what they're doing now. Got to be able to score more than 2 to 3 runs. Well, the Diamondbacks don't factor in regardless of who the opponent is. The Diamondbacks coming back, I think, spark the memory of the losses at home. You're looking at this season and you're saying, man, everything's going well. They're winning at home. They're in first place. This team is better than they were a year ago. The pitching's been outstanding. But to me, Arizona being in town this weekend does make me think of, they beat me. They beat me. And I had the home field advantage. And even last year, when the Phillies were not as good as they were this year, record-wise, they weren't as good as they were this year, last year at any point in terms of how many games. They're 25 games over. They were never that good last year, even though they were 90 and 72 at the end of the year. There was no point in the season that they were 25 games over 500. They were 49 and 32 at home last year. They were a really good home team. They're on a better pace than that this year. But they still had the chance to win 1 home game and couldn't get it done. And that, to go back to that text message, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. The Diamondbacks don't factor in big picture. It's what they're doing now. They got to be able to score more than the 2 to 3 runs. I agree with that, Luke. But what makes me think of it is that Arizona's coming back this weekend, and you couldn't get the job done, and that was the team that beat you. And that's the team that beat you, and they were an 84-win team. Because, let's be honest, the Phillies are going to be the Braves this year. They're going to be the team that wins 104 games. But is there a team that's going to win 84 games that makes the playoffs and is a thorn in your side? It's a great possibility, and it's a great question. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Arizona in this weekend. The pitching matchups, they're not glamorous. They're not playing this very well right now. They played a lot better recently, but they haven't played great baseball this year, Arizona. They had a lot of injury issues. They're actually live right now. They're down 3-1. They're up 3-1 in the fourth against Washington. You know, Washington, if the playoffs start today, they would be the second team in the wild card. But the pitching matchups this weekend for Citizens Bank Park, they're not great matchups. Jordan Montgomery against Taijuan Walker, that's the game tomorrow. By the way, the game tomorrow is on Apple TV+. I'm just giving you the heads up now if you want to go get Apple TV+. Jordan Montgomery, you guys remember him. Texas, free agent. A lot of Phillies fans wanted to go sign him this offseason. He's been dreadful for the Diamondbacks. Walker's going for the Phils. So that's your game Friday night. By the way, tickets for that game, it's interesting. You go to ESPN.com, you look at the schedule. The tickets for that are as low as $53. As low as $53. Every other game, okay, go to Wrigley Field, $37. Detroit, $19. Pittsburgh, $19. Yankee Stadium, tickets as low as $19 for Braves and Mets and Yankees. Cincinnati, $19. Miami, $4. Cleveland, $30. Texas, $10. Houston, $19. Colorado, $10. San Diego, $17. The A's, as low as $12. The Dodgers, tickets as low as $43. Philadelphia, $53. It is the highest ticket on the board for Friday night. So Saturday, you're getting Tommy Henry against Zach Wheeler for Game 2 of the series. And in the rubber match in Game 3 on Sunday, it's Slade Ciccone against Christopher Sanchez. So that's your pitching matchups for the rematch of the National League Championship Series. A lot of text messages coming in, 609-403-0973. Luke chimes in. He says, don't get me wrong, I want the revenge sweep. Yeah, I mean, I think it's not like a measuring stick game. The Phillies are clearly better than the Diamondbacks are this season, but I definitely think that for me, this series just reminds me of the disappointment, and it reminds me of no matter how good you are over the 162, if you're not your best in October, the 84-win team can catch you. I mean, the Phillies won 90 games last year. It's not like they were schleprock, right? They won 90 games, and yet that wasn't good enough to beat the 84-win Diamondbacks. 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. Tim in Galloway says, Mike, why depend on the past? Each season is different. The upcoming series is separate from last year. Let's promote this year's Phillies. Just my opinion. Tim, I have done a lot of that. Come on, man. I agree. I will always say this season is different from last season. It's different from the year before. Every season, it's its own story, chapter, compartmentalized. But I'm asking you guys out there whether or not you're past that. As this team comes back in, it does make you kind of think back to, man, big picture, no matter how fun and how good this season is. And we're going to talk about this later on tonight. But I was listening to Mike Missanelli's podcast. Mike's been on the show a bunch of times. He does his podcast. And he did the podcast, and the topic was, are the Phillies so good that they're boring? And I understand the premise is that they're so good that the season is almost like, I want to get like meaningful. As sports fans, we've lost our way somewhat, where nothing matters except for the playoffs. Like Tim and Galloway, you're right. I'm not depending on the past, but the opponent coming in, it makes me think of what happened. And it's that you can win 100 games and play the 84-win team. Like some of the worst losses for the Phillies, when they lost to the Cardinals, that was an 85-win Cardinals team, and the Phillies lost that series. They lost to the Diamondbacks last year, which I contend is one of the worst losses in the history of the franchise. To lose those two games at home against that team, it's gut-wrenching. But as a sports fan, it's so hard for us now I liken this to like a wrestling fan. The wrestling fan gets ridiculed a lot, right? Hey, you guys know it's scripted, it's fake. Yeah, you do know that it's scripted and fake. The wrestling fan isn't a fan for the outcome. They're a fan because they're smart enough to be able to suspend disbelief. The disbelief of, I know that the writer has come up with the result of this match, but it is the ability to suspend disbelief. In other words, I can allow myself to be entertained by the storyline and the athleticism and all the stuff that is wrapped into what the eventual result is scripted. But the wrestling fan can allow themselves to, you know what, for 2 hours tonight, I'm going to allow myself to be entertained. And it feels like in sports, we are unwilling to suspend disbelief. We are unwilling to allow ourselves to be entertained by anything other than playoff success. You win 120 games, don't care. You win 70 NBA games, doesn't matter. You go 13 and 4 in the NFL. If you don't win the Super Bowl, you suck. Mike, why is Sunday's game at 11:30? Because it's on Roku. That's why. Roku has a new MLB package. It's the old Peacock package. All right. I can hear everybody with a couple chuckles there. When Peacock had an MLB game, it used to be on at 11:30 in the morning. They got rid of that package, and Roku bought it. So the exclusive game is this 11:35 Sunday morning game. So that is why. So Friday night the Phillies are on Apple Plus, and Sunday they are on Roku. Now, I don't even know what the hell Roku is. I know what Roku is, but I'm saying I didn't know they had a channel. So I don't know how you get that. I can't even begin to explain to you how you go about getting this. A couple other things real quick. So I apologize, but I'm answering that text message. It was just kind of, here's another interesting text message. I don't know what this is really stemming from, Terry and Galloway, but I will read it because I try my best to read every text message that comes in. 609-403-0973. Terry and Galloway says, I was really hoping these rumors last year about Josh Harris moving the Sixers out of town were true. It would be awesome to start fresh with an expansion team in Philadelphia. The Sixers are just so unlikable. I don't know what that's in reference to, but I don't know that there were ever legitimate rumors about Josh Harris moving the Sixers out of town. I know they're trying to get a new arena. I have not heard about Josh Harris moving the team out of Philadelphia. I don't think that would happen. I can't imagine the NBA wants a team to leave Philadelphia. So, Terry, I don't know where that text message came from, but the Sixers are just so unlikable. Yeah, right now the Sixers are kind of an unlikable team. That's fair to say. They've been disappointing. They've let us down. They have been basically like Groundhog's Day. You have good regular seasons, and then you disappoint us in the playoffs. We are unable to suspend disbelief for the Sixers in the regular season. We've gotten to that point where the booker, if you will, keeps giving us the answer before the playoffs get here. It's this team's not good enough to get out of the second round. But, Terry, thanks for the text. What was I? This weekend at Citizens Bank Park. It is, and we're going to talk more about this tomorrow, but it hits my mind because I just got the text message, the email from the Phillies. Tomorrow is Cole Hamels' retirement night. They're asking you to be in your seats by 6:20 for an on-field ceremony with Cole Hamels. And I do want to bring it up today because Cole Hamels was one of my favorite Phillies of the 08, 9, 10, 11 era. I think he was the most underappreciated Philly. And for whatever reason, some people didn't appreciate Cole, didn't like Cole, or didn't whatever Cole Hamels. You can make an argument. I have said many times that Brad Lidge had the greatest season a Philadelphia Philly ever had. The most important season ever. he was perfect in saves the year that the Phillies won the World Series. You can't ask for much more than that. Be perfect in the year that your team wins a World Series. But in the year that he was perfect, Cole Hamels was the MVP of the NLCS, and he was the MVP of the World Series. So while I think Lidge was maybe the most important figure of that year, Cole Hamels showed that he was a big game guy in stepping up in both the NLCS and in the World Series. So I'm very intrigued to see what kind of reception he gets. I think he's going to get a good one. Obviously, now that it's been, over about 15 years since that World Series, that the fans are certainly going to remember him and give him a huge ovation. And you got the whole thing with the Diamondbacks coming in, the NLCS rematch, Cole Hamels' retirement night. So that will be a pretty cool moment. They are wearing the City Connects tomorrow night, which kind of ruined. Did anybody see the red City Connect? There was a red version of the City Connect that was kind of bouncing around on social media, and it was pretty cool. See, now the red City Connect, I think that's what gets. I don't not like the City Connect. It's just that I don't. Have you seen ESPN.com has been ranking the City Connect uniforms? And many of them are terrible. So I don't feel as bad about the Phillies being terrible. It's just that the whole concept of the City Connects were terrible. It's like Nike took the City Connects and said, we're going to make the worst uniforms we can come up with for all the teams in the league. They're all bad. There's not one where I'm like, man, those are pretty good. I don't think I saw one. Does anybody have a City Connect from a team that they've liked so far? Because I cannot find one. I went through the list at ESPN.com, did the rankings of all the City Connect uniforms. I'm telling you, and by the way, in the rankings, the Phillies were at the bottom. They were ranked, I think, out of the time, I think 28 teams had a City Connect jersey because the Dodgers just released theirs the other day, which was terrible. And I think 28 teams now have the City Connect. Here it is. Grading the City Connect uniforms. This was over at ESPN.com. So there were 20 uniforms released this year. The Phillies were one of them. So the Dodgers, they have their second City Connect uniform. I don't know why you would want two of those monstrosities. Like the Minnesota Twins look like the Seattle Mariners in their original time. I don't know. You can check it all out, but I haven't seen one City Connect uniform that I've really been all that impressed by, including the Phillies. It's the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. When we come back, 7 NFL teams under the most pressure. 609-403-0973.
Zaxby's has been perfecting chicken fingers for 30 years. So what now? Now, we go to the sea! Introducing the Southern Fried Shrimp Meal. With butterflied shrimp that's perfectly golden fried. A perfect blend of cocktail sauce and Zax sauce that we call Zax Tail Sauce. Plus perfectly seasoned crinkle fries, perfectly buttery Texas toast, and even a drink with perfectly pebbled ice. Here's to 30 more years of perfect. The new Southern Fried Shrimp Meal at Zaxby's. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Keeping it going on a Thursday, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. What's up, everybody? Mike Gill with you. We teased it on the other side. 7 NFL teams under the most pressure in 2024. Who you got? 609-403-0973 on the text board. Who makes the list? 7 NFL teams under the most pressure to succeed in 2024. PFF put out the list. 7 teams under the most pressure to succeed this season. Are they self-explanatory? Or is it teams you're not thinking of? Well, I got the 7 teams here. OTA's done, mandatory mini camps. We got the slowest period of the football season. So now who's got to live with all the pressure getting ready for the 2024 season? Well, let's take a look at the list of the teams that made the PFF list here, starting off with the New York Jets. Yeah, Jets got to be on the list. Aaron Rodgers, don't know what's going to happen with him in the future. It's pretty much now or never. Rodgers, 40 years old. I've said many times, last year I thought this was the best team in the AFC East if Rodgers played. Rodgers doesn't play. They go 7-9 or 7-10, and they have disastrous quarterback play. If Aaron Rodgers is the Aaron Rodgers we saw in Green Bay, do they have a Super Bowl roster? I think they do. Their defense is outstanding. They've got weapons on the offense. They've upgraded enough, I think, on the offensive side of the ball, on the line. But, yes, they are under the most pressure, probably of any team in football. When you got Aaron Rodgers and everything that's going on there, I would put them right at the top of the list of the 7 teams that are going into this season with the most pressure hanging over their head. Can Rodgers stay healthy? And if he is he the same quarterback that he was in Green Bay? Fascinating question. Miami Dolphins are on the list, another AFC East team. They started 11-4 last year. They end the season getting bombed in the playoffs, and quite frankly, they lost a lot. Now, they did add. They were 11-6 last year, tied for first in the AFC East. The offense we know, Hill, Waddle, Tua, they're all back. You got Bradley Chubb. They add Jordan Poyer, Kendall Fuller. They got Ramsey, who was hurt a lot last year. They should be pretty good on the defensive side of the ball. They lost Vic Fangio. The funny part about Fangio is he comes to Philly. Does Philly look at that as a positive? And does Miami look at that as a negative that they lost Vic Fangio? This is a team that I think has a lot of pressure for this reason. They have to get home games in the playoffs. They were very good last year, but they go on the road against the Chiefs, and it's snowing 26-7, the finals. Same thing would happen if they have to go on the road to Baltimore, or if they have to go on the road to New York, or if they have to go on the road to Buffalo. Those are the stops in the AFC. You got Cleveland. You've got Pittsburgh. You've got Cincinnati. You've got the Jets. You've got Buffalo. They are not warm weather places. Kansas City, no fun. So if the Dolphins want to make a serious run, they're under the most pressure. Why? Because they have to get home games. It is almost imperative for them. Without home games, I can't take them seriously. All right, number 3 on the list. Teams with the most pressure to succeed in 2024. We'll stay in the AFC. Let's go to, they got Jacksonville. Jacksonville's the Philadelphia of the AFC. Playoffs the year before, great season, high expectations, great start, 8-3. They finished 1-5. They don't make the playoffs. Now they sign the quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, to a monster deal. And you take a look at what they've done around him. Is it enough? Probably not. They spent the most money in free agency this offseason, over $312 million with Trevor Lawrence back. But you got to wonder. You look at Jacksonville and you say, is that roster good enough to get them out of second place, past Houston, and into the playoff? They didn't even make the playoffs last year. They finished 9-8. Christian Kirk. They lose, of course, Calvin Ridley. Do they even have good enough weapons? Brian Thomas Jr., I think they added Gabe Davis from Buffalo, Travis Etienne, the running back there. Their offense is just okay. I'm not like, wow, look at the weapons on this offense. Last year when you had Ridley, you had Kirk, it gave you 2 guys that you were like, all right, game breakers. Defensive side of the ball, Devin Lloyd, Josh Allen. You've got questions on defense as well. I say, why are they under the most pressure? Do I agree with PFF saying that they're one of the 7 teams under the most pressure to succeed? Probably, because you just signed the number 1 overall pick from a couple of years ago, Trevor Lawrence, to that deal. You have Doug Peterson now going into his 3rd year. They cannot take a step back, because then you have to start wondering, do I have the right coach for the football team? They signed the quarterback, so they think they have the right quarterback. But if they don't make the playoffs again, do they start wondering about Doug Peterson? So I would say Jacksonville probably belongs on this list of the 7 teams under the most pressure to succeed this season. Next up, Chicago. Now, Chicago's interesting. 10-24 the past 2 years, PFF says, but you got Caleb Williams. They went out and got some weapons and had some weapons at return on this team. Let's take a look, what Caleb Williams is going to be throwing to this year. And they do have some interesting weapons here. Like, you take a look at this offense and you say, all right, he walks into kind of a ready man. They won 7 games last year. Keep that in mind with Fields. This Bears team is not like a team that had the number 1 pick that only had 4 wins. They did have a couple, 7 wins. They went out and got DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. They drafted Odunze. So they've got some weapons for Caleb Williams. He walks into kind of a ready-made offense. With Swift, interesting to see if they use him a little differently than the Eagles did, throwing him the ball out of the backfield. DJ Moore, I wouldn't say is a bona fide number 1, but he's one of those guys, him and Keenan Allen, I think will be, and Odunze could be the best of the group. I mean, they got 3 really interesting wide receivers for Caleb Williams to sling it to in year number 1. Plus, I like the tight end, Cole Kmet. Can he be a bigger part of it? Their offensive line, though, disastrous. I mean, that's going to be the problem for them. Can the Bears' offensive line keep up? Because I think they have enough skill players to be a pretty good team. Can they go from 7-10 to 10-7? Can they flip that thing around? They've got a pretty good defense. Last year, we talked to, during the Super Bowl, we talked about T.J. Edwards and how much better that defense was when we had Clay Harbor on the show. And he talked about adding T.J. Edwards. They have Tremaine Edmonds. They added Kevin Byard from the Eagles. That'll be interesting to see if he has anything left in the tank now that he's going to, he's out of Philadelphia. He had to learn that defense on the fly. Then he had to learn another new defense when Matt Patricia took over. So does Kevin Byard have anything left in the tank there? Jalen Johnson, very good. So they've got a pretty good defense. Montez Sweat, they got him from Washington. This is a really interesting team. Would you say they have some of the most pressure, though, in 2024? Maybe. Caleb Williams and making those moves, are people in Chicago saying this has to be a playoff team? Are they good enough to be a wild card team? In the NFC, they might be, but that's a tough division. Detroit, Green Bay. See, now we're looking at the 7 teams. This is Pro Football Focus's list, not mine. So I would agree and disagree with some of these. Now, the next one is Atlanta. I don't know Atlanta if I put them on the list with the most pressure. They did add and spend money on Kirk Cousins. We know the whole story. They drafted the quarterback in the first round, and everybody was going crazy, Michael Penix Jr. If you take a step back and look at the big picture for Atlanta, that move isn't horrendous. I think people just piled on the move because of the money they spent on Cousins. But I like it in the big picture for this reason. How many years is Kirk Cousins going to play quarterback for you at a high level? Maybe 2? Right? Do you look at Kirk Cousins right now and say, yeah, he's got 5 years left in him? No, of course not. He is 35 years old. So maybe Kirk Cousins plays 2 more years. And in those 2 years, maybe Atlanta is a wild card team. Maybe they win a division and they get knocked out of the playoffs, and they're kind of like that team that gets knocked out without winning a playoff game. Well, now you're in that 9-8, 10-7 range where you're not getting the quarterback. But now they already have the quarterback sitting and waiting. They have followed the Green Bay blueprint. Draft a quarterback when you already have one. So Kirk Cousins, 35 years old, maybe he takes them to the playoffs this year. They go one and done, and now they're in the draft, and they're drafting, 19. You're not getting a quarterback at number 19 that you feel comfortable with. So I don't hate it from that perspective. Now, does this team scream Super Bowl to me? Of course not, but I like a lot of their weapons. Bijan, Drake London, Pitts. They've got a couple of playmakers on that team. Is their offensive line able to hold up? That'll be a big question. What's their defense look like? Their defense, to me, good, not great. This team has the makings of 9-8, 10-7. They play in a terrible division, so they should be able to be in the playoff mix. But do they have some of the most pressure this year? I think I could find a couple more teams to put on my list. Rounding out the top 7, number 6, in no particular order, by the way, the Dallas Cowboys. They're always on this list. But why should they be on this list? Well, they have Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb still needing to be paid. You wonder if this team, in their mind, has taken a step forward. They lost a couple pieces. Keep in mind, if the game started this Sunday night or Thursday night, let's say it was a Thursday night kickoff and Dallas was playing, and they're playing tonight, right? We're starting the season tonight. They're going to turn around and hand the ball off to Zeke Elliott. He would be their guy. CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Jake Ferguson, they still have that trio. The offensive line, a lot of questions. They drafted a couple of guys. Are those guys ready to step in and make that offensive line a strength of this team? Tyler Guyton, Terrence Steele, Martin's very good. We'll see what that offensive line brings for Dallas this year. That's going to be, the microscope will be on that line. Because, of course, Dak is going to be – look, Dak Prescott's one of those guys. You either like him or you don't. He's productive. CeeDee Lamb is awesome. But those two guys haven't been paid yet. What does that mean for that team? Then on defense, Dallas, Lawrence, Micah. They added Eric Kendricks. Does he have anything left in the tanks? Diggs. Deron Bland had a great year last year. Can he follow that up? The local kid, Marquise Bell. What are they going to do with him? He played a lot of middle linebacker last year. They brought Kendricks in. But that defense was very good, but keep in mind, there's a new coordinator there now. So they've got to see if they have the right people. I find Dallas to be very interesting. Many people thought they kind of either stayed the same or took a slight step back. But with the salary problems there, they are definitely on this list. And number 7, it's Philadelphia. They put Philly on the list, and they deserve to be on the list. And I'll read what they wrote for Philadelphia and React. They wrote, after making it to Super Bowl 57, the Eagles delivered an encore that certainly wouldn't have won an Oscar. The team started a near-perfect 10-1, but imploded down the stretch, dropping 6 of 7, including an ugly wild-card loss to the Bucs. Philly's defense was a black hole for much of the year, ranking 28th in PFF coverage grades. Consequently, they drafted Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean with the top 2 selections. Beyond that, the Eagles hired Vic Fangio, replacing the tandem of Sean Desai and Matt Patricia. The team's offense was regularly a mess down the stretch, with 5 of its 7 lowest-graded overall offensive showings coming in Week 13 or later. As a result, Brian Johnson out, Kellen Moore in. In the beginning of the post-Jason Kelsey, Fletcher Cox days, the Eagles returned to the magnificent 2022 form, or will Nick Sirianni, one of the most polarizing coaches in the league, get the boot? What happens in Philadelphia this fall will be the focal point for the NFL season and beyond. Well, there's a lot there. Obviously changes on offense. Obviously changes on defense. 2 huge changes on the defensive line and the offensive line. You talk about pressure, no question about it. The Eagles belong on this list. They are one of the 7 teams under the most pressure this season because why? They went to the Super Bowl. The coach is a Super Bowl was a part of that team, and now he's under the microscope, much like Jacksonville. What happens if Jacksonville doesn't make the playoffs this year? You could be talking about Doug Peterson. What happens if Philadelphia takes a step back this year? You're definitely going to be talking about Nick Sirianni. There is no question about it. Philadelphia belongs on this list. So who else belongs on this list that did not make the list? I got to say Green Bay would be one of them. I think Green Bay has to be on the list. Everybody is picking Green Bay like it's a rite of passage, and I'm not saying I don't like that, but they came out of nowhere last year, Green Bay, to do what they did. So are we just assuming that Green Bay is fine, no problems, they're going to be right back at the top of the list? I think that's tough, man. I think it's tough to just assume that Green Bay would be a playoff team. Now, I think that if you look at the odds, you would say, yeah, they should, but that's my point. My point is, man, people are just assuming that Green Bay, and I think that's where the pressure comes into play. Is it not? When people just assume? When people just say, hey, that team was good last year, they're going to be good again. They were good last year, but people were surprised by the fact that they were good last year. That's the difference for me. So I think Green Bay belongs on this list. I think Green Bay would be a team that belongs on the list of any list that says you got pressure entering this season. Another team that I think belongs on the list of teams with some pressure, and there's a bunch of them, but I got to put Houston on the list. Now, I think Houston's going to be pretty good, but now you're entering a season with expectations. Last year, the expectations were that you're going to win like 4 games. Now, people think you're going to win the division and possibly be a Super Bowl contender. So how does Houston not make the list of the teams with the most pressure? That team added. There's a lot of buzz about them. I think Houston belongs on that list. So I put them on that list. I would put, as we mentioned, Green Bay on that list. I think another team that you got to put on that list might be almost every team in the AFC North. They all have pressure to some extent because, not Baltimore, because we know what Baltimore is. But Cleveland, after making the playoffs last year with Joe Flacco, now you're asking the quarterback who has been, since you gave up the moon, the sun, and the stars to get, now you're asking him to match what Joe Flacco did last year? Pittsburgh brings Russell Wilson in, a team that made the playoffs last year, and essentially said, hey, our quarterback wasn't good enough, so let's bring in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields to see if we can be better. And then you got the Bengals with Joe Burrow back healthy. They signed T. Higgins the other day. That Bengals team, they went to the Super Bowl. Then last year, no playoffs. I think the pressure's on them to get back. There's a lot of teams you can be in this category. They pick 7. You could pick a lot. I think you could put Buffalo in there. I mean, everybody's just assuming that Buffalo, they lost so much that it's just going to make the playoffs. I'm not sure that's even a given. So what teams do you put on the list? 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. I look at those teams as the teams on my list that have the most pressure in 2024. PFF put theirs out there as well. Who do you have on the list? Let me know. 609-403-0973. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. Hey, I got a deal for you. Hey, I've been telling you about this deal. I hope you've taken me up on it. Bring any written estimate for a new 2024 Acura from another Acura dealer over to my friend Rocco at Key Acura of Atlantic City, and he beats the price by $500, and he'll give you an additional $500 on your trade. That's it. You go someplace else, new 2024 Acura, they give you a price. You take that price, you bring it to Rocco. He says, cross that out, take $500 off. Simple as that. And now through June 30th, get a 36-month lease on a 2024 Integra for just $299 a month with $49.95 down. Key Acura, Tilton Road, EHT, your small but friendly dealer. See dealer for details. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. We got a lot more to do on this Thursday edition as we get you ready for the Phils tonight. Actually, no Phils tonight. Phils this weekend. Phils finally have a night off. See, I'm so used to the Phils having a game. They finally have a night off. this weekend, of course, we'll be all over tomorrow with Bob Wankel. With the weekend preview, it's a rematch at Citizens Bank Park of the National League Championship game. By the way, that game tomorrow night is Apple TV Plus. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. The game on Sunday's on Roku. So you got two whammies this weekend with the Phils. Hey, don't shoot the messenger. I'm Mike Gill, and this is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
Atlantic City. This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
I can't stand them. I hate Boston. Great city, great fans. Obviously they got some great players, but he hurts me a lot. So hopefully, this offseason we find a way to get better and, add some pieces and
Joel Embiid Friday night at the finals. He was almost giddy sitting next to Paul George. And then Kendrick Perkins said, I think the final piece might be right next to you over there. The Celtics win tonight. The NBA offseason begins. You can start signing back your own free agents. We'll take a look at the offseason plan, including Joel's comments and how realistic Paul George feels. I feel like we've heard this name for like 3 years now. So we'll ask another Paul. Paul Hudrick from Liberty Ballers is back as the Sixers offseason is about to get underway. The draft is 2 weeks from now, and then, of course, free agency will begin, and we'll take a look at all of it now with Paul Hudrick from Liberty Ballers is back here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. What's up, Paul?
Mike, I'm doing great, man. Good to see you. How are you?
Yeah, man. It's, Joel Embiid out of the woodworks. Was at an NBA Finals game the other night. They found him down in the barrels of the Dallas arena. Hey, you want to go sit next to Paul George and chew it up a little bit? He seemed giddy about it. What do you read into Joel's happiness of being there with Paul George?
Well, it turns out it was his idea, Mike. As Tim Bontemps from ESPN reported that Joel Embiid was just there, right? Like he was there with Josh Harris just to watch the game. He found out that Paul George was going to be on NBA Countdown. I said, let me hop on NBA Countdown. And listen, anyone who's covered Joel Embiid over the years, for him to put himself out there and say, oh, no, I want to go on NBA Countdown, that's purposeful. Like, that's a huge deal. This is a guy that doesn't always, he takes care of his obligations for the most part, but isn't always the most kindest and cuddly with the media. So for him to go out there and say, no, Paul George is here, I want to go on there. Very purposeful stuff from him. And Mike, you and I have discussed it often. He's not a big recruiter. It's not what he's done over the years. He's generally taken a stance of, I let the front office do their thing. I'm going to do my thing. That was not the case on Friday night. That was on public television, him saying to Paul George, we want you, and that is him saying to Daryl Morey, we want him. And Daryl Morey, I think, is saying say less in that department because I think it's very clear he is their number one choice.
Yeah, we've heard his name so much. I mean, it seems like his name has been reported with the team based on, a couple of factors. Is it, Paul, the cap space and it just makes sense? Or is there a relationship there that says, hey, no, these two guys would want to play with each other?
All the above, I think. And then I would also add, I'll get started with the first thing you talked about. As far as free agency goes, Paul George is probably, if he does change teams, Paul George will be the best player this offseason to change teams, most likely. I think LeBron James goes back to the Lakers. I don't think Donovan Mitchell's going anywhere. I'm not sure Jimmy Butler is going anywhere. So when you factor that in, Paul George is going to be the best possible player to leave a team, perhaps. So that's part of it. The second thing you touched on, absolutely, there is clearly a connection with Paul George and Joel Embiid. That Friday night, again, was pretty clearly Joel Embiid saying, I think Paul George could absolutely be that missing piece for our franchise. Would love to have him here. A clip has been passed around, from earlier this season where Paul George on his own podcast just gushing over Joel Embiid, talking about how he thinks Joel Embiid is this generation Shaquille O'Neal. That is not small praise, right? I mean, that's a big deal for a guy like that to say something like that. Said that they've built a relationship from, talking at all-star games and they have a a friendship. So that is very real too. The last thing I would say, Mike, is, I'm sure we'll get into it, and like some people who just really are out on Paul George for whatever reasons they have, but like you will not find a cleaner on-court fit for what they need when you're talking about Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, than Paul George, who is a big playmaking two-way wing that by the way, took 8 threes a game last year and made 41%. That alone, Mike, is worth its weight in gold, not factoring in that he can play defense, that he can create off the dribble, that he can get his own shot. You know, I know the playoff record is spotty, whatever, but he's had some big playoff games.
Yeah.
So when you factor all that in, I think on court, he's a terrific fit with Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid.
All right, there's a lot there because, one, yes, his playoff, you know, when he was in Indiana, he was the guy. Here he would be the third guy. You know, the Clipper thing, all right, he's been in and out of the lineup. He's had some injury issues. Why do you feel that there is this, I'm not all that excited about Paul George? Because you seem to think that this would be the right fit and would be the perfect guy between Maxey and Embiid.
Well, to clarify, there is no such thing as a perfect basketball player. No matter, because like my thing is always this, Mike. If you're a Sixers fan and you're saying to me you don't want Paul George, give me your alternative. Who do you want? Like, you're probably not getting LeBron James. Jimmy Butler. Okay, you want to say you want Jimmy Butler over Paul George? Okay, I can go along with that. The issue is Pat Riley is going to turn Daryl Morey upside down and shake all the contents out of his pockets out for you to get Jimmy Butler here. And then on top of that, at 35 years old, you're going to have to give him a max extension. With Paul George, you don't have to do that. It's cut and dry. You sign him, it's done. And then you go beyond that. You're not getting Donovan Mitchell. It seems very clear Donovan Mitchell is in Cleveland. So my thing is, if you're a Sixers fan and you do not want Paul George here, give me your alternative. What player do you want? You can tell me about role players. And look, I love, you know, there's certain guys I love. I love Contavious Caldwell-Pope. You tell me that your idea is you want to sign Contavious Caldwell-Pope and I don't know, Malik Monk. Sure, that's okay, but like Paul George would be better. It's a better option. And as you already referenced, he is going to be the third guy in the pecking order here. It is clearly Joel, it is clearly Tyrese, and then it is Paul George. And I just think about that series alone against the Knicks. If you simply swap out Paul George with Tobias Harris, this team's in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's not close. Like, they are there. They are an Eastern Conference Finals team. If you just simply swap those two players out, not accounting for how much better Paul George is than Tobias Harris. So, look, it's an uphill battle. They're going to have to beat the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics look like a juggernaut, and they're going to mostly be running it back next year. But when you talk about the rest of the East, if you add Paul George to this mix and then fill out the roster, I like them over every other team in the East other than the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, Paul Hunter from Liberty Ballers is with us. I mean, obviously, and it's the cleanest. You can just sign him. You don't have to make a trade like you would for Jimmy Butler and some of the other names that have been out there. But he is the highest. LeBron obviously would be the highest profile free agent if he hits free agency. But he would be the highest profile free agent that would be available tomorrow if free agency started. He is a unrestricted free agent. But, yeah, and Embiid going out there and being giddy like that and just being like, you know, hey, we can make add some pieces. I mean, that was pretty unbelievable to see that. And you wonder, like, how this Olympic thing will kind of help Joel and maybe add to that.
Yeah, I think too, Mike, like this is, look, everyone kind of, we're all humans, right? Like we all grow, we all mature at different times, different things happen. I think if you're objective and you look at Joel Embiid, I don't know how you can't see the growth as a person, as a basketball player this guy has made over his time here. Clearly has, you know, spent more time caring about his physical fitness and his health. Now, look, he tears his meniscus. What are you going to do? He tears his meniscus. But it was clear when he came back, he was in as good a shape as he was going to possibly get in, all things considered. We've all seen what happens in the past when Joel Embiid comes back from injuries and he's not in shape. It hasn't gone well. He scored 50 points in a playoff game. I mean, this is This is a thing and like the game 6, the game in which they were eliminated, Joel Embiid was great in that game. He was awesome in that game. It was Tyrese Maxey who clearly saved their season in game 5. He struggled in game 6. But I say all that to say, like, there is a maturation that we've seen from Joel Embiid throughout the years. And I think that is another sign of it, of like, instead of just saying like, it's the front office's job, it's not mine. No, Joel, like, you are the franchise player. You are the star. You are the MVP of the league at one point. It's your job too, to go out there and make these guys want to come here and to recruit them. That's part of the deal when you are a star, when you are a franchise player. That comes with the territory. So I think he's recognizing that as well. That's part of it. And yeah, I think the Olympics thing is absolute. Look, he's playing with some of the, not just the greatest players in the sport currently, some of the greatest players to ever play the game. When you're talking about LeBron James, Steph Curry, like, absolutely getting the chance to rub elbows with those guys, see kind of what they do behind the scenes, what makes them tick. I think it's a totally invaluable experience for Joel Embiid. He's going to learn so much. People that worry about health and injuries, like, look, he's not going up against the Boston Celtics every night. There's going to be some countries that they're just going to completely dominate and obliterate, and he's going to play like 20 minutes a night. So let's kind of curb ourselves with some of those concerns. I get him to an extent, but I think he'll be fine. I think absolutely it is a net positive, that experience for him to go to Paris and go to the Olympics.
All right, let's look at some of the other potentials out there. Let's go with OG Anunoby, who obviously played for Nick Nurse. If they could get him, would you be more excited about that fit and adding OG, a younger player, or Paul George?
Still Paul George. And that's, I love OG Anunoby's game. I think he'd be a hell of a fit. If they wind up not being able to land Paul George and Anunoby's the guy instead, that's a pretty good consolation prize in my book, because as you mentioned, he is younger. Talk about two ways. I mean, he's definitely a more impactful defender than Paul George is at his age. The offense, he can fade into the background sometimes, Anunoby, but at the same time, we saw it against the Sixers. He hit some big shots. He made some big plays. He's smart. He's capable offensively. I think there's maybe more there, and I don't know, maybe Nick Nurse can get that more out of him to make him more of like a third offensive piece. But like, as far as defensive impact goes, you're not going to find too many wings that are more impactful than an OG Anunoby. Then the other thing is, a lot of people have expressed concerns about Paul George's age and his injury history. OG Anunoby's got plenty of injury issues in his past, so that would be a pretty big concern as well. But with all that said, Anunoby as a guy that if that doesn't work out, Anunoby would be a fantastic fit here. I still think he winds up back with the Knicks one way or another. I don't blame Daryl Morey and the Sixers for making sure that price gets nice and high for the Knicks by putting this out there, that they would be interested in him. But at the same time, I do think ultimately, considering what New York gave up to get him, how well he fit there, I think he winds up staying in New York.
Where would you be with Klay Thompson?
That's a tough one. I wouldn't be I think one idea that was kind of intriguing, I think Jake Fisher from Yahoo put this out there, is like all the balloon contract ideas, right? Like a balloon contract, meaning a high salary but low term. So like maybe like a 1+1 deal at like 20-ish million or something like that. And then what that does is too, so let's say Jimmy Butler makes the situation in Miami a nightmare, and by the deadline he's available, you could use those contracts, ship them to Miami along with your draft picks, and make that work. But at the same time, so let's say theoretically, Mike, you get Klay Thompson and you get Kentavious Caldwell-Pope on those balloon deals, $20-ish million. Look, that's a team that's probably better than last year's team, I would say, right? I mean, that's a team that you're replacing Klay Thompson and Caldwell-Pope, used instead of Tobias Harris. Those are the guys you're putting out there. That's two guys that can play both ends of the floor. They can both shoot. They're both playoff tested. They both won championships, multiple championships. So, it's kind of an interesting idea, that kind. And I guess that's where some people who don't necessarily love Paul George, that would be the direction they would go. But look, Klay Thompson is not the guy he once was. Flat out, he's not. But he can still shoot the basketball at a really high level. You think about the looks he would get, again, playing off of Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. Same with a guy like Caldwell Pope. I mean, that's four starters there when you talk about those guys. It's pretty high-level basketball players that, again, playoff-proven guys that have won. So that wouldn't be certainly my first choice. But if it winds up, getting down the list of choices, I don't think that's a bad one at all. And I think, Mike, this conversation, what this all illustrates is that there are options, right? Like if it doesn't work out, you have so many paths you can go down because of the flexibility you have that I think everyone has to keep an open mind with. Because say whatever you want about Daryl Morey. He hasn't gotten the team past the second round. There's no other way around it. But this guy's one of the most creative executives we've ever seen in this sport. And I've never known him to have this type of flexibility with a roster when you're talking about cap space, draft capital, and what he can do. So the possibilities are kind of endless here.
Yeah, and the creativity because of the flexibility. I mean, but does he want to straight trade? I mean, a straight sign a free agent or – a lot of people asking, hey, can you get creative and come up with a trade that people aren't really talking about outside of the aging veteran guys like a Jimmy Butler? We've heard Brandon Ingram's name, but is there somebody else? I know Lauri Markkanen's name seemingly fringing out there, but is there somebody else that you would be intrigued that maybe his name's not popping a whole heck of a lot that they do have the ability to get creative with?
I'll start this off by saying I am I hate that I've become this, but I'm a Brandon Ingram truther now, because I just think he's so much better than what people realize. And then on top of that, he's 26 years old, and you're giving him the Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse is one hell of a coach. We've seen what he's done with guys, what he's gotten out of guys. We saw what he got out of Kelly Oubre this year. Imagine, him getting his hands on Brandon Ingram. I would be very intrigued by that. Some people would not. Fair enough. But I do think there's no reason to think that these guys would necessarily be available. But sure, I think Kevin O'Connor of The Athletic mentioned LaMelo Ball. Maybe Charlotte, if they draft a guard early, would they then be looking for a team that would take on LaMelo Ball? And a LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Maxey backcourt would be really, really intriguing. LaMelo, when he is healthy, he is awesome. He's a high volume 3-point shooter at a high level creator, can allow Maxey to play a lot of reps off the ball. You put him and Joel Embiid in a pick and roll and good luck. I think he's an underrated defender. I think he's a better defender than what people give him credit for. He plays really hard on that end, actually. So if there is a way, if Charlotte is open to trading him, I think Daryl Morey would absolutely be interested in that. I seen the name Cade Cunningham thrown around at Detroit wants to kind of start over. It's intriguing. And especially with I think the thing with Cunningham is he's still on such a low salary because he's still on his rookie deal. And you could still do a lot of things in free agency if you were to figure out a trade for him. I don't know if those guys are going to be available. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen between now and then? I'd say too, the other thing, when you're talking about flexibility and having all this, think about what the Celtics right now are coasting to an NBA Finals. When they made that Porzingis trade and that Holiday trade, the offseason was over, right? That was deep into the offseason. So I think it just shows you if you position yourselves with star players and assets, you almost have to just kind of wait for your opportunity, wait for something to arise that makes sense for you. And the Celtics found two great deals, getting Porzingis and getting Holiday, that didn't seem like they were even going to be on the table. Think about it, Mike, if we were a year ago, if we were talking about the Celtics, you would have never thought Kristaps Porzingis would be a Celtic or that Drew Holiday would be a Celtic, right? We never would have seen those things coming, but they happened. So I think, again, it just speaks to all that flexibility and that we just all have to keep an open mind for what could be out there.
All right, Paul Hunter, Liberty Ballers. Let's go to who they have. Batum, Lowry, Oubre, DeAnthony Melton's an interesting one. Cameron Payne, Buddy Hield. In your mind, any of those going to be priorities?
I think they would love to get Batum back if he doesn't retire. And I think Batum was very happy here. I think he did enjoy his time. I think he loved playing with Joel Embiid. I think they have a clear relationship. I mean, everyone loves Tyrese Maxey. That's just that he just kind of has that personality where he just kind of is a magnet and people just gravitate towards that guy. So I think Batum would be a priority guy for sure. I think they would Lowry and Oubre too. I think they would love to have both of those guys back. I think they fit really well, not only on the court. I think they fit well in the locker room. When you're talking again about Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, I think they fit well with those personalities. I think Nick Nurse clearly loves Kyle Lowry. I think him and Oubre kind of had an understanding and a good relationship. Oubre really gushed about Nurse at the end of the season. So it's just going to depend on what I think with Lowry. It's more possible because I can't see him getting more than maybe the minimum around the league. I'm curious to see what his market is. Same with Oubre. Like, I don't know. The market is clearly above the minimum for him, but I don't know what it is. So I think I'd have to see where he kind of think the Sixers are in the same boat, right? I think they kind of want to see where his market goes. Could they get him on that mid-level exception around $8 million, and then he could parlay that into a multi-year deal next offseason with the Sixers? We'll see. Hield, I'm not optimistic about Buddy Hield coming back. Just because I get shooting gets paid and he can shoot. So I think someone will wind up maybe overpaying for him a little bit. Campaign, if he wants to come back on the minimum, I think he'd be a great guy as like a second or third ball handler. We saw the kind of juicy kind of brought in that Knicks series. He's a good basketball player, right? Like, he just, for what he is just a solid NBA player. So again, if you could bring him back on the minimum, I think they'd have to be open to that. Beyond that, it's tough to know. Will Paul Reed be back? I don't know. That could be an interesting thing too with his the non-guaranteed contract now. Could he be used in a trade? Do they just waive him to clear more cap space? They can go a lot of avenues there. Could they use him in a sign-in trade for something bigger with Brandon Ingram? Like, there's a lot of different kind of funny things they could do. Again, just a lot of optionality, a lot of creativity. Daryl Morey, could use this offseason. Well,
and the Melton thing, somebody brought this up the other day about because I was talking about how Derek White is like a guy the Sixers just have not been able to get. That fourth, fifth guy who just is not afraid of the moment. Like, he's not the best, but when the other guys are struggling, he's not afraid of the moment. Was Melton supposed to be like that kind of guy? Like that, hey, I can score 14. Not every night. You don't need me. But when someone, we've never seen him really healthy. Did he fill the role that they went out and got him for? Probably not. He looked at times like he was there, but I don't know that they can count on him.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was a really effective player when he was healthy, but like to your point, he just really, that back. It's 2 years in a row that back injury really creeped up on him, and it was clearly hindering him and his effectiveness. So. Again, he's another guy. I put him kind of in the same category as Oubre. Like, I think they would like to have DeAnthony Melton back. It's going to depend on what his market is. Does someone maybe throw it like maybe a team like Orlando could make some sense because they could use his shooting and maybe you talk about balloon deals for the Sixers. Maybe they throw a balloon deal at him for like 1 year, $15 to $20 million, and that probably puts him out of the Sixers range. If he kind of goes around the market and doesn't see what he likes, maybe he circles back with the Sixers and kind of gets a 1 year prove it deal, and he can test free agency again if he can be healthy. So maybe he can make sense there. For the Sixers, I think he'd be a great fit. But I think the guy, Mike, when you talk about that Derek White type of guy, I think Kentavious Pope is the name I brought up before. I think that's the kind of guy who can do that. He's over 40% from three. He has some creation chops. Not a guy you want to have a huge role in that department, but he can do it, especially if other guys are having off nights. Defends at a very high level. So I think that's more the guy. But I think, I for sure, I think Melton can do some of those things. When he's healthy, he's a high level, high volume shooter. He can create off the dribble as like a secondary playmaker. He's an impactful defender, gets a lot of steals, gets his hands in the passing lanes a lot. Pretty good on-ball defender, so he can do a little bit of that. But again, his market, I think, I'm just, again, very curious to see what anyone's going to throw him and if that leads to him circling back with the Sixers.
Paul Hudrick from Liberty Ballers. And, of course, the offseason could be here before we know it. The NBA Finals could be finishing up here as soon as tonight. If Boston wins, you can sign your free agent starting tomorrow. Free agency begins right after the draft. The draft is a 2-day event. It's June 26th and the 27th, like 4 o'clock in the afternoon for the second round of the NBA draft. And, of course, we'll have more on the Sixers in the offseason. Paul Hudrick, everybody. Liberty Ballers at Paul Hudrick. Thank you, buddy.
You got it, Mike.
All right,
Take
there
care,
you go. Paul Hudrick, everybody, here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Great segment with Paul. I know. Sixers are down on everyone's list right now. But the offseason, with a lot of assets and the ability to make a lot of changes, could change all that. It's Mike Gill. Whether you're a contractor or do-it-yourself, Progressive Fence and Railing has the region's largest selection of glass rail, cable rail, aluminum, composite, vinyl, with delivery to your home or job site on time and on budget. Or let the pros at Progressive install it for you. They'll help plan your project and get what you need when you need it. Visit ProgressiveFenceandRail.com or one of their 4 locations. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
It's Mike Gill
And I am the voice of the voiceless.
on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. I'm Mike Gill. A little Sixer stuff there with Paul. We'll do more Sixers tonight at 5 with Austin Krell. We'll get his take on a lot of the things. No Phils tonight, so kind of turn our attention to what's going on with the Sixers. We'll talk Phillies a little bit later on in the show as well. Football at 4 with Mosher. Knicks Nuggets all next hour, but we'll talk some Eagles right now. Zach McPherson. How many people remember Zach McPherson's on this team? You know, he was a draft pick, went to Penn State, transferred to Texas Tech, played with the Eagles, tore his Achilles last year. Well, he's back in a very crowded defensive back room. And when you talk about Eagles defensive backs, I don't know that his name comes up. Right? You've got Slay, Bradbury, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. Then you got that whole other group of guys that were all kind of in the mix last year. Kaylee Ringo, Eli Ricks, and just a plethora of guys who all have some intrigue. When you talk about the Eagles secondary, you're like, there's a lot of guys here that are intriguing to me. That like I want to see what happens when we get to training camp. You know, Mekhi Gardner, Mario Goodrich, Tyler Hall, Josh Jobe, Avonte Maddox. I didn't even name those guys. Isaiah Rodgers. I didn't name him. You know who else I didn't name? Zach McPherson. He's entering his 4th year now, and he was on a podcast, the Thomas Mott Show. Now, I got full disclosure. I don't know Thomas Mott. I don't know who he is, but good get by him, I guess, finding Zach McPherson in the middle of the summer. And I'm not mocking the guy. He actually got him to say some interesting things that we should break down here, because on top of everything else, it was about a 25-minute conversation. We kind of pulled out. Now, Josh is off today, but we pulled this interview on Wednesday, and he got me the sound in preparation for the segment today. So I said, Josh, when you're off on Thursday, I want to get this audio because I want to break it down. So he pulled the audio for me yesterday. So the podcast, I think, came out on either Tuesday night or maybe Monday, somewhere around there. Somebody told me about it, and we have the audio for you today. Now, I don't know how many people had heard this because Thomas Mott does not have a ton of followers on this show. I mean, it's like 4,000 or 5,000 maybe. So, I mean, again, I'm not knocking the guy. Good job getting him. But I did not know about the article until other people started to point it out to me. So I listened to it on Wednesday, told Josh, hey, can you pull some of the sound for me? So we have some of the key clips from that on today's show here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, so McPherson, guest on the Thomas Mott Show podcast. Let's start with the first bite here that I thought it was about 10 minutes in where he started to ask him about some of the problems that happened with the team. And he starts off by saying that the team, both players and coaches, lost sight of their goal. Take a listen.
It's so tricky to get into, and obviously in my position, I can't really say too much, but I just felt like we lost sight of the goal in a way. That goes everybody included, from coaches all the way down to the players. But I mean, it was just we were in such a rough spot. We tried to dig ourselves out, but we just couldn't stop the bleeding.
I know what everybody's asking. The first question that comes to your mind is, how are you at 10-1 and you lose sight of your goal? How does that happen? I have two theories on this. One of the theories would be, did they prioritize beating like the 49ers to kind of shut them up more than the goal of winning the Super Bowl? And then they get their butts whipped, and that everybody started to have doubt creep in their mind. Like, that's the only way I can hypothesize what he just said. That players and coaches lost sight of the goal. Did the coaches and the players prioritize winning a regular season game? Because remember, the 49ers had been complaining and saying all offseason, you only beat us because the quarterback got hurt. That's the only reason. And then people got, hey, the game wasn't fair, the quarterback got hurt. And did the Eagles prioritize winning that game above all else and then lose that game, and then doubt creeps in? And then the doubt crept in so much so that you got your butts whipped again the next week, and then the next week, and then the next week, till it just snowballed to where you now believed or didn't believe that the original goal, because remember, think about this. You had beaten Dallas, you had beaten Kansas City, and you had beaten Buffalo in consecutive weeks. How many teams in the league can say, I beat a team like Dallas, Kansas City, and Buffalo back to back to back? Probably none. And then you lose to San Francisco, Dallas, and Seattle, and then the doubt really starts to creep in. So his comment there is befuddling, and that's the only way I can come to terms with possibly that happening, is that they lost sight of the goal because they prioritized. If that's not the case, then are we to believe that the priority wasn't to win and that it was selfishness, and that the coaching staff, well, the coaching staff, which is not here anymore other than Nick, was a part of that? All right, that's part one. Number two, McPherson says that they are trying to use last year as a learning experience.
I feel like it was more of like one of those things, like you just take it for what it is, take it to the chin, and use it as a learning experience. That's kind of what we're doing this year. We don't want to experience those feelings again, the feeling of, losing however many games we lost straight, because it just wasn't fun.
Wasn't fun. So what are you learning from last year? Well, I guess number one, if my theory is right, and I'm not saying that it is, it's just a theory, but we can't prioritize any one game on the schedule above anything else. The goal is the goal. We're the Philadelphia Eagles. Our goal is to win a Super Bowl no matter what happens during the course of the season that could potentially derail us. What did you learn from last year? Well, I can tell you this. They learned that having experienced coaches might help, and they went out and found them. Vic Fangio, ton of experience. Kellen Moore, a lot of experience. What is to be learned from last year? I think it's that, hey, we have to have much better structure around this team. You can't have Sean Desai and then pass the baton over to somebody else in the middle of the season. That doesn't work. Now, I will say other teams have done it. Buffalo did it last year. They changed their offensive coordinator in the middle of the season. It's not always that it doesn't work, but I think that was more of a streamlined situation. You went from a guy, Sean Desai, who wasn't here, to another guy who wasn't here and doesn't even run the same defense, and said, hey, run this defense. You don't know the defense. You don't call the defense, but call his defense. And that doesn't work. So what do we learn from last year? Continuity could be king for the Philadelphia Eagles. Number three, Zach McPherson on the Thomas Mott podcast. He says the Eagles, they couldn't stop the negativity that started the spread last year. This is an interesting bite. Take a listen.
When those negative vibes are in the air, it's kind of infectious. It's hard to stop that spreading disease. You got to chop off that limb and nip it in the bud early, and I feel like we didn't do that. So it just spread like a wildfire, and that was just the sum of the rest of that season. It wasn't a talent issue. It wasn't necessarily like a coaching issue. I just feel like it was something that was within us. We just couldn't stop that wildfire.
That's an interesting one. Okay, so it wasn't a talent issue. By the way, we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks. 33rd team ranks the Eagles roster number 2 overall. Pro Football Focus ranks the Eagles roster number 3 overall. So nationwide football evaluators, they agree. They don't think it's a talent issue here. He said it's not a talent issue or a coaching issue. Well, 3 of the coaches that were here last year, they're gone. They fired 90% of the coaching staff, but the coordinators are gone. I think the organization, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more with Jeff Mosher coming up at Football at 4 at the top of the hour. But the one thing here is this. The Eagles never addressed, hey, this is what happened, and then this is what we're doing to fix it. It was all nonverbal here. But the nonverbal cues are, we had a coaching problem, and we think we fixed it. Right? The organization got rid of 90% of the coaching staff, both of its coordinators. Now, you would say, well, what about Sirianni? Is he, not a part of this? I think the Eagles organization value what Sirianni brings to this team. Not as an offensive mind, not as a X's and O guy, but as the leader of the football team and the leader of the locker room. And I think you'll hear in the next bite here from Zach McPherson that the team seemingly is on board with that, because I got to imagine, and you'll hear this next bite, which I think kind of stands out, and we've have a lot of bites that we can play over the course of the last 3 to 4 months that kind of fall in line here. The players like Sirianni. It's almost like the Phillies. There's people out there that don't like Rob Thompson as the X and O manager. He leaves his guys out too long. He did this. Why did he do that? The bottom line that is more important than all those things is the players like playing for Rob Thompson. They feel comfortable playing for Rob. Rob gets the best version of his players. So will he make a mistake here? Does he make a mistake there? Him and every other baseball manager make mistakes. But the players like playing for Rob. And I think in this bite here from Zach McPherson, that's why Nick Sirianni is still here.
Nick does a phenomenal job. I mean, since the day I came in, obviously me and Nick came in together. In terms of coaching this team, I say Nick is just doing a great job with it. He's a really inspiring coach. He brings the best out of his players. He truly cares about all his players. And that's what you want in a coach that fully trusts his players, no matter what role you have on the team. And a coach that cares about the culture of this team is everything you need to have a winning program.
So there's a lot there that's interesting. I almost want to hear that bite a second time, because he says that he gets the best out of all of his players. The players love playing for him. He builds a winning culture. And some would say, well, how do you lose 6 out of 7 and call that a winning culture? I think that, and we don't know what happens behind closed doors in the offseason, but did Nick Sirianni go to ownership and did he take accountability? Hey, guys, I picked the wrong guys. Brian Johnson was not the right guy, and that's on me. Sean Desai, not the right guy, and that's on me. We need to do a better job of finding guys that fit in line with the culture we want to build. Well, we don't know, but I think it's clear that guys like Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, and many other veterans on this team have all fallen into line with Nick Sirianni is the guy they want to play for, and that he gets the most out of these players. I mean, Kelce has been just, over the top sometimes. Take a listen to Kelce this offseason.
Nick, and I really mean this, is one of the best coaches I've been around, and talking about coaching situational ball, really understanding what to do in the right moment, motivating guys. We coach things up in team meetings and hold people accountable better than pretty much any other coach I've been around.
Pretty strong from Jason Kelce. And if there's somebody that you're going to say, he said that about the coach, how can I be critical of the decision to keep the coach if Jason Kelce makes such a strong endorsement for the coach? So McPherson called Sirianni great at being a head coach. Let's play the McPherson bite one more time and kind of, because there's so many different things he says in here that you can kind of highlight. Let's play it one more.
Nick does a phenomenal job. I mean, since the day I came in, obviously me and Nick came in together. In terms of coaching this team, I say Nick is just doing a great job with it. He's a really inspiring coach. He brings the best out of his players. He truly cares about all his players. You know, and that's what you want in a coach that fully trusts his players, no matter what role you have on the team. And a coach that cares about the culture of this team is everything you need to have a winning program.
He inspires. He gets the best out of his players. He cares about the players. He trusts his players. And it all comes back to that word culture. Do you guys trust that Sirianni builds the winning culture that this team needs and can get past what held them up last year and brought them down? It's going to be a big question throughout the course of this year. Finally, Zach McPherson, he called Sirianni a different type of coach, and he said his success from the past speaks for itself.
Nick is one of those guys who's different. I mean, it's hard to make it to the Super Bowl in your second year as a head coach. Even going to the playoffs, forget all that. Going to the playoffs 3 years in a row, that's not easy. A lot of teams, I have a lot of buddies in the NFL who haven't even sniffed the playoffs, you know. Nick, he's doing the right things. The players love him. We follow his lead.
Players love him. They follow his lead. So I guess the questions that build off of this culture conversation with Nick Sirianni, if he's such a great head coach and great at building the culture, what happened? Well, look, greatness has times of darkness. If you learn from it, you could walk down the hallway of whatever corporate building that you work in, and I'm sure they have stupid sayings on the wall, just like our office, right? What is, failure? Oh, it's the blah, 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 right? It happens. Right? You're not always great. You're not always great in such a competitive field. So did they lose sight of the goal? Maybe as a team they did, but did the coach lose sight of the goal? And you would say, well, how could he not get everybody on board? Hey, listen, we've all worked with some bad apples, right? There are times where you work with somebody and you're like, I just can't get this guy on board. He just doesn't buy in. And you've got to take the right opportunity to get that bad apple out. Sometimes it just kind of brings everybody down until the right opportunity comes and you say, okay, now we can kind of move on and get back to our goal and our culture. We got to find those right people again. So I can understand that. How does nonstop negativity spread in the locker room? It only takes one guy to be miserable and get a little clan of people that kind of go his way. And those people, you ever live with a roommate and when you pulled up and their car was in the front yard, you were like, oh, my God, this guy's always home, right? You have that roommate that you live with sometime and you're just like, I just don't want him to be here. And I think there's teams, there's work environments that when you show up to work, you're like, oh, my gosh. That happens. So I think that we all just assume that everybody gets along on these teams, and it's a professional football team. They're all fun. They all love it. It's not always the case. Not every year. That's why good teams don't win every single year. Something happens. Look at Golden State, right? They got great talent, but then something happens on that team, and for that season, it's like we just couldn't get that out. So do the Eagles players like Sirianni? Do they like playing for him? I think that's evident. Look, Zach McPherson has nothing to gain here, in my eyes. I think Zach McPherson probably knows inside he ain't making this team. Maybe. Long shot. he knows that everybody's talking about that position, and everyone's bringing up every name but his. So as he's sitting here saying, hey, I got to let Nick Sirianni know. Now, he's not going to come out and blast the guy. But I certainly think that he can sidestep it and be like, hey, listen, we had problems last year. But it all comes back to the players like Sirianni. They like playing for him. And I think the Eagles organization knows that. McPherson brought up how hard it is to make the playoffs in the NFL. He said, heck, I got guys that I know that are buddies. They haven't even sniffed the playoffs. Our problem as Philadelphia Eagles fans is the sniff of the playoffs has now become like an athletic sweat sock. That smell is not good enough for you. You want more. The Eagles think that Nick Sirianni has more in him. We're about to find out. Training camp, July 23rd. Football at 4 on the way. If there are things that are going to hinder the Eagles, what are they? What are some of the concerns Jeff Mosher has? 4 reasons for concern. That's today's Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Hey, I want to tell you about my friend Rocco over at Key Acura of Atlantic City. I've been telling you now that if you go get a written estimate price from another Acura dealer on a 2024 Acura, he'll beat that price by $500 and give you an additional $500 on your trade. And now, through June 30th, you got 10 days from today, get a 36-month lease on a 2024 Integra for $299 a month with $49.95 down. That's it. No tax tag fees, blah, blah, blah. That's the number. Key Acura, Tilton Road, EHT, your small but friendly dealer. See dealer for details. Football at 4 with Jeff Mosher is next.
97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
Just hungry to bring back another Lombardi to Philly. The fans deserve it. Our team deserves it. Culture begs for it.
Now live, this is Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Jeff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. And, of course, check out all their YouTube content like Football at 4. Just search Inside the Birds. There's Jeff Mosher on this Thursday. He flip-flopped with Andrew. We did a little chat about the AFC North. Andrew, we are in our division previews when Andrew joins us here. That might be the best division in football. The NFC East is kind of like half and half. You got 2 teams with a lot of expectations, 2 teams that don't kind of know where they are. So this should be an interesting year for the NFC East. But we're going to take a look at some concerns that you guys over at Inside the Birds have about the Eagles entering training camp. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up? I'm glad you brought that up. We actually spoke on a recent podcast. Adam and I were just, I don't know what got us off track a little bit, but we were saying that, it would be really nice just as objective media members. I know Eagles fans probably don't care about it, although I think some of the old school might. It would be nice if the NFC East would go back to being at least a 3-team division, if not all 4. Because there was a time, and we're dating ourselves here, but it was in the 80s, right? Where in early 90s, where the NFC East was the NFC beast. I mean, the Eagles could be good or bad. The Giants could be good or bad, but they were very competitive, and you had trouble, identifying it was Eagles-Cowboys rivalry, but the Cowboys also thought they had a rivalry against Washington, and Washington and New York was a big rivalry, and all 4 teams could beat each other up, and they still can, but for too long now, Mike, it's been the NFC least, where you've had the Eagles and the Cowboys jockeying it out for the better part of the last 10 to 15 years with an occasional New York or Washington decent season. I mean, Washington won the division a couple of years ago at 7-9. Yeah. So it would just clearly the AFC North is the cream of the crop in the NFL. And it would just be nice if the NFC East could.
By the way, the NFC East will play the AFC North this year.
Yes, they will. And it would just be nice if the NFC East could get back to being what it used to be.
If there's a third team, is it New York or is it Washington?
That's a good question. I think both of them have different strengths, but obviously it all comes down to the quarterback, right? And if Jaden Daniels winds up being what a number 2 quarterback pick should be and a Heisman Trophy winner, he walks into a situation where he's got Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. They signed Zach Ertz. They upgraded the O-line a little bit. They've got some nice defensive pieces, especially in the middle with Payne, right? Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen. So it would probably be Washington, but if you go through the Giants roster, you'll see some pretty good talent on defense, and Malik Neighbors could be the type of guy who uplifts Daniel Jones the way Odell Beckham came in and sort of made the Giants really scary for a little bit before it went south. So ideally both. But I feel like Washington's got a little bit more pieces if the quarterback is legit.
All right, Jeff, you guys mapping out some concerns about the Eagles, some of the things that you're looking at as we get into training camp season. Of course, we're about a month away today, June the 20th. So July 23rd, a month and 3 days until we get there to training camp. So let's map out a couple of reasons for concerns that you guys might have over at InsideTheBirds.com as we get close to training camp here.
Sure, and let me put out a disclaimer because this is a 2-part podcast series. Part 1 dropped today, and that was our 3 to 5 concerns about the Eagles that maybe in a way that we will go really inside scheme and stuff. So we're not just talking about obvious stuff, right? But then Monday's podcast on the flip side will be 3 to 5 things that we're really encouraged about that maybe people aren't talking about enough. So we're balancing it out. It's not a Negadelphian thing. I can already hear people be like, "Oh, great, your 5 major concerns about the team. Why now?" But no, it's a balanced series. So next time you're on with me, Mike, on Monday, we can talk about what we're really encouraged about.
All right. So Thursday is the negative day. Monday will be the positive day.
We're all about balance.
The people like to hear the negative. They like to hear what the issues are. So let's kind of dive into some of the issues you think. I'm interested to see if I agree or disagree here.
Yeah, so I think something that we haven't talked about a lot. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation about the coaching staff, and right now it seems like there's being some things perpetuated in the media or by fans about, how much of the offense is going to be different, how much is going to be the same, Kellen Moore's impact. But one thing, Mike, that I don't think that we've discussed, although on Inside the Birds we have, and I'm going to bring to light more, is the idea that you are marrying 2 offensive minds who don't come from the same tree. And that's not just 2 offensive minds, but you have a whole staff, right? And Jalen Hurts played pretty well. Obviously, he played well enough 2 years ago to be an MVP candidate and was the best performer on the field in the Super Bowl, even in a loss, right? And that was with an offense that was orchestrated by Nick Sirianni, Kevin Patullo, Shane Steichen, Brian Johnson, and Jeff Stoutland. Those are like the 5 main guys. I mean, there are other position coaches, but those are like the 5 main guys, right? Last year, the only one of those 5 that was gone was Shane Steichen. Brian Johnson got promoted. Still Kevin Patullo, still Nick Sirianni, still Jeff Stoutland, right? And obviously, things did not go well, because of some predictability issues, some difficulty in adjusting and adapting to what defenses were now doing to the Eagles after their success. But instead of sort of hitting a refresh and saying, all right, here's this offense that's worked really well, RPOs with Jalen Hurts, running, quick game, deep ball, right? Let's refresh it. Instead of that, they obviously scrapped everything, right, and brought in Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore is not from the same tree. And why that's a concern to me, and again, this is just a concern that you would have on the peripheral until we see it work out. We don't know. But this does sort of remind you of what happened in 2020 when Doug was forced to fire his assistants, right?
Yeah.
And then bring in new guys. And then all of a sudden you've got Andrew Briner from college, and you've got Marty Morningweg, the old school West Coast guy. And then you have Rich Scangarello, who's supposed to bring this Shanahan-style motion and movement. And then you have Doug Peterson. And it was not a good mix because you had different ideologies. And we had heard after the season that there were some really tense meetings and throughout the season as things weren't going well and clashing of concepts. And when you bring in Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier to now work with Nick Sirianni and Kevin Patullo is the pass game coordinator. It's not his passing game. So I think it's fair to say, hey, we just saw something like this happen a couple of years ago, and it was an utter disaster. I'm not predicting an utter disaster. I'm just simply saying you have a conflict here of offensive minds, and it's not easy to make everybody just kumbaya and work together.
Well, the interesting thing about this whole thing, Hurts comes out a couple of weeks ago and says, the offense is 95% new. That other 5% is very interesting to me. And the whole concept of this offense has been weird, yet successful in some instances, that you have a play caller calling plays that aren't his, right? I mean, that's what we are led to believe, is that Nick Sirianni says, here's my playbook, call my plays. That doesn't sound to be a recipe for success, yet it worked for them a couple of years ago with Shane Steichen. Is that what happened? Steichen called?
No, see, I think that the harmony was already there from Steichen having worked with.
And there's your difference, right?
And Kevin Patullo work. Yes. And that's what you normally get when you have functional offensive coaching staffs who, normally a head coach hires his assistants. They hire their assistants for a reason, because they either worked with them or are like-minded, or they may want a different approach or something that they're deficient at and bring that person in, but then they grow together, right? Like that's what happened year one. Year one wasn't a great year. They didn't have great talent, but they grew together with Jalen Hurts. And then by year two, they were able to add to it, further it, and bam, they had this great 53-man roster in the offense. They add A.J. Brown, and everything that they had already put in place, they were able to work off like a foundation, right? And build. And then year three, they just didn't do a good job of adapting and to what the defense and the harder schedule and what defenses were going to do to them. But now you just kind of rip it all up. And like you just talked about there, now you've got guys who are not part of the tree, who aren't part of the foundation, who are now being asked to just take over everything. Well, what do the guys do who are here already, like the Kevin Patullos, right? Jeff Stoutland, Nick. Like, what is their?
Well, does that lead to the answer that Jalen Hurts gave 2 weeks ago when asked about, hey, what's Nick Sirianni's role? That's a good question, because it almost goes back, though, to what was his role. I find this to be a fascinating conversation. What was his role on the team that went to the Super Bowl, and how does it differ from the role he has now?
Sure. And I at least as a head coach, you can say, all right, I am more like Mike Tomlin. I am more like these guys are heavily involved in the play. So it's really not a fair comparison. Jim Harbaugh, and I'm sure he'll be involved. It's not like he's not going to be in the meeting rooms, right? But you do have to wonder, like, at how much is he willing to say, I'm just going to sit here and recommend things? And I just don't like the idea of coaches, and this goes back to 2020, coaches who are caught in between. And Kevin Patullo, we don't talk about Kevin Patullo. He's not a big name. He's a very important coach. He is Nick Sirianni's right-hand man. He is the associate head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. He is an important part of the staff, and his offense has always been West Coast rooted. Came over from the Colts with Nick. What is his job at this point? Because does he feel like his voice matters in the meeting room when it's an entirely new offense that he doesn't have experience in? What's his job now? Right. I just don't like that concept of guys. We can talk about Nick Sirianni and how bad that looks, but at least he is the head coach and can assert himself. Kevin Patullo can't walk around the NovaCare complex like, all right, well, it's not my offense. I'm going to go work with the defense. I'm going to work with – no, he's the pass game coordinator, or at least he was, and the associate head coach, and he's got to be in an awkward position right now.
The way you map that out. And let's say this season went off the rails. They're 2-6. Would they make a decision on the coach in midseason? Would Kellen Moore be that guy? Would Vic Fangio be that guy, or would it be Patullo?
It's a great question. I mean, I have a hard time thinking. I feel like, just personally, that Patullo and Nick Sirianni are tied together. Nick brought Patullo in. Mm-hmm. They are right-hand men for each other. So if the organization were to make a decision to move on from Nick, it's hard to imagine that Patullo gets elevated or stays, especially if they're going to turn to Kellen Moore instead. But if they're 2-6, Mike, I'm not sure Kellen Moore is going to be the guy that they're going to be anxious to promote either.
True,
it just depends on how it all looks.
Yeah, and listen, if they're 2-6 and we're talking about that kind of stuff, this season really got bad.
I was going to say this conversation is not going to matter much.
Well, I would say this conversation would have more layers to it because you just talked about reasons for concern. The coaching staff, which, by the way, I think we can continue that conversation. We're about 13 minutes in on this Thursday Football at 4 with Jeff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. But there are a couple of other things. But I think you're right that the coaching staff mix, because my opinion is nobody has a true explanation of what happened over the final 7 games. The Eagles never came out and said, here's what happened or here's what we think happened, and this is what we're doing to fix that. They non-verbally said our coordinators were not good enough. We replaced them. To me, that's what they're non-verbally saying happened. That was the biggest change this offseason, replacing their coordinators. Now, there are other things that they did that they think factored in, which you guys probably chronicled in the podcast.
Yeah, we did. And again, I don't even understand why people aren't pointing to even last year when you had a defensive coordinator and his top counselor or assistant, whatever, in Matt Patricia being from a totally opposite or different defensive tree, and how you wouldn't see that being similar to what you have with the offense right now.
Right. Well, exactly. And listen, there are a lot of things that we can really kind of, pick apart here, but let's get into some of the other reasons of concern. And I guess you got to look at the 2 guys that retired.
Yeah, I mean, and you asked me, we actually talked in the podcast about the question you asked me last time I was on with you, which is who is more difficult to replace, right? Fletcher Cox or Jason Kelce. And, I gave you an answer, but the answer is really just yes. It's not just about talent, Mike, though. Like I told you with Jalen Carter's got great talent. I mean, he may have just as much talent as Fletcher Cox naturally and inherently. So it might be easy to say, step in there and be Fletcher Cox, and for the next 10 to 12 years, you'll dominate. But Fletcher Cox played a ton of snaps, even in years 10, 11, and 12 for the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Carter didn't play nearly as many snaps last year, and at Georgia didn't play that many snaps. And we can throw Jordan Davis into that mix as well, although we've already had that conversation. So to me, it's about the 4-man rush, Mike. When you look at the Eagles' most potent 4-man rush, because that's what it comes down to, right? They're not going to blitz that much. The 4-man rush is going to be most likely Bryce Huff on one side. I'm thinking Josh Sweat or Nolan Smith on the other. Maybe they kick Josh Sweat inside to make 3 defensive ends if they feel that way. Or maybe Josh Sweat comes off like Vinny Curry used to do in the championship year, and they bring in Brandon Graham to play inside. But that 4th guy, the second or first or second interior pass rusher has got to be Jalen Carter, or this thing isn't working out. And if Jalen Carter doesn't have the endurance, stamina, conditioning, whatever you want, to be able to play first and second down, right, and then be in that 3rd down pass rush, well, then that's a problem, because it's not going to be Jordan Davis yet either. He hasn't proven he's a pass rusher. And, yeah, sure, I like Moro Ajomo in year 2, and maybe he shows a little interior burst, and same thing with Milton Williams. But
I think Milton Williams the guy, man.
He could be, Mike, but this thing is built around Jalen Carter being a dominant interior force. Milton Williams, I think, is a very good story, but I don't think you're getting 10 or 11 sacks out of Milton Williams. Last year he had, a half a sack? 1 sack? I don't try to base everything on sacks, but he's not someone who's proven to come in and play that many reps and be able to – he's good situational pass rusher or part-time guy.
I would say that I think Milton Williams, let's see, I remember, was it last year entering? I think he had 4 the year before. And we were asking the question.
Historical year, right.
Yeah, and we were asking the question. He had 4, and if he had double the playing time, is he a guy that can get 8 with half more snaps? That would be interesting to see. Now, last year only got a half a sack. He didn't have – I don't think they – like the play time that he got last – go ahead.
Yeah, to your point, he played 395 snaps on defense in 2022.
Wow.
He played 100 more snaps, Mike, and got 3.5 fewer sacks.
That's surprising.
So that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's a good pull by you on the fly there. All right, let's get into your next concern, which I guess has to be we got to take a look at the wide receiver position. You got 2 guys that everybody loves. What about the rest of these guys? What's up there?
Yeah, so the point we were making was depth is obvious. You know, we beat a dead horse on, well, you only have Paris Campbell or John Ross or the rookies Aniyah Smith and Johnny Wilson or a guy like Joseph Nagata. Like, who knows who's going to step up to be this number 3 or if the number 3 is even on the team. But I want to extend this point out even further, Mike. It's about, to me, the health of your top 2, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown. If they were to miss a prolonged amount of time, 3-4 weeks, or heaven forbid, even longer season-type injury, Vontae Maddox type thing, who knows? I think the offense would be in so much trouble. And that's even if you convinced me they had a better number 3 receiver, Mike. The point I made is, and this isn't going to happen. I know it's out there, but it's not going to happen. If the Eagles traded for Amari Cooper, right? And Amari has the ability to play inside, outside, and you can make him your number 3 and loop and snap. And then A.J. Brown got hurt and missed 5 games. I wouldn't feel great with Cooper and Devontae Smith because A.J. Brown is special. I'm not taking anything away from Amari Cooper, but A.J. Brown and the rapport that he has established with Jalen Hurts is so special. And the same thing with Devontae Smith. You saw how well he played against the Bucs when A.J. Brown, even in a loss, when A.J. Brown couldn't play that game in the playoffs. These 2 guys are unique and special, and you can't just plug and play with even other good wide receivers because of what they've built on with this quarterback for the last 2 years. So it's not just even about the depth. It's about what happens if one of these 2 has to miss an extended amount of time and you're plugging anybody in there. It's just, to me, it's just not the same. I like Amari Cooper, but I don't think he's in the same stratosphere really as A.J. Brown.
Yeah, I don't know if it was you that I asked. It might have been Andrew or Adam. Is the 3rd wide receiver on this roster, or is he not here yet?
And that's my point is I don't even think it matters. Like, you're not trading for a guy or picking up a guy on waivers who's going to be as good, nearly as good as the top 2 that you got. So it's really important they stay healthy.
Well, it's interesting. You know, the year they went to or won the Super Bowl, they picked up a bunch of guys who were just kind of 1-year guys, vagabonds, had injury issues, and they all seemingly hit. You know, you had
Alshon and Torrey, yeah.
Well, you had Chris Long and Patrick.
Those guys, yeah.
And I mean, guys that you were like, could Paris Campbell, like, if he's healthy, is he the answer at that spot? Like, if he's a good Paris Campbell, is that the right guy? They got the right guys. They had question marks coming in, but they ended up being the right guys. If Paris Campbell answers those questions, is he the right guy?
You know, to me, the issue is he's sort of miscast. I mean, he was a slot receiver once in his career, and that was like 2 years ago, that last year with Matt Ryan and the Indianapolis Colts, where he mostly played inside. He has great speed. He hasn't stayed healthy. You'd want him as an outside Z receiver. He played the slot, and if you look, it's like, oh, wow, he's productive. He had 63 catches for like 630 yards. But, you know, that's like 10 yards a catch. This guy is 14 to 16 yards per catch average when healthy and putting that speed to use. You put him in the slot, he's just catching passes over the middle and zone.
All right, last one for Jeff Mosher as we take a look at some of the concerns that the guys over at Inside the Birds, the podcast, have entering this season. And, you know, yesterday Andrew was on. You guys flip-flop, so I'm kind of confused on my days. But yesterday was Wednesday. Andrew filled in for you. And at the end of our conversation, he says the safety is probably the thing. You know, everybody's looking at this corner room, but he wrote about the safety picture over there. And that's a legitimate concern because while we can name 6, 7, 8, by the way, speaking of corners, you know, I think people forget McPherson, and he was on a podcast the other day, had some interesting things to say, but no one even mentions him when we talk about the corner room, right? But the safety room, is that a concern going in?
If I were a fringe corner like Zach McPherson, man, I would be like spending the next 5 weeks trying to learn how to play safety because there could be such a great opportunity in opening. Yeah, it's a concern. Their best safety, CJ Gardner-Johnson, has missed so much time and has been so injury prone that you can't just rely on him, right? And even when he's healthy, as prolific of a playmaker he is not the type of safety like what Justin Simmons used to be in Denver or Jesse. Like he's not the well-rounded. He's not a very good run defender. He's excellent making plays on the ball. That's why he was a very good nickel in New Orleans. But I joke with Adam because Adam loves him and I like him too. But I said, you talk about this guy like he's made 3 or 4 Pro Bowls. He hasn't. He's never made a Pro Bowl. He probably would have made it 2 years ago with the Eagles when he had those 6 interceptions in 8 games. But he obviously got hurt. But there was times where the Eagles were getting run on in 2022, and he was a big part of trying to step up into the hole and make a tackle. He's not very good at it. So that puts pressure on Reed Blankenship to then be that guy. He's probably a number 3 safety. I don't know how great of a run defender he is as well. He really struggled at it last year. He struggled at everything last year. And then past those guys, Sidney Brown showed you some nice things. He can probably be a better run defender. But again, he's only played a few games. He's coming off ACL. It's just so thin of a position right now. It's tough.
Yeah, I know that the Bradbury thing, I don't know how to read into that. Is that going to be a legitimate competition? Is he there?
I read 0 into it.
Well, by the way, this morning, the Eagles put out a video, Sidney Brown doing the gritty, so maybe his knee's okay.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Maybe he'll be ready for camp. I feel like we have so many more things we can get into, but alas, you must listen to the podcast to get it all over at Inside the Birds on all podcasting platforms. We gave you a little taste today during Football at 4. Moshe is back on Monday, and we'll take a look at some of the things that they like about this Eagles team. Yes, a lot of people, I don't know if it's more of a national thing because Pro Football Focus, 33rd team publications that are ranking list season, everybody has the Eagles roster as like a top 5, 3 to 5. 33rd team had him at number 2. So yeah. I don't know. Are there things we're missing about this roster? We can dive into that as Football at 4 cruises on in the offseason. Jeff Mosher, everybody. Don't forget, if you miss any Football at 4s, you can check them out on the Inside the Birds YouTube channel, and their podcast is out on all podcasting platforms. Jeff Mosher, thanks, buddy.
Have a great weekend. Stay cool out there, all right?
We will do our best. It's cool down the shore, man.
I've heard about that. I'm going to have to figure it out for myself.
No doubt. Come on down, man. Let me know. All right, Jeff Mosher, everybody. And Football at 4 is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, 97.3 ESPN mobile app. And coming up, Nick Earnshaw is back with another edition of Nick's Nuggets. No Bills tonight. So, Sixers, off-season, that's been on our mind throughout the course of the day. Who's the Sixer? Who's the player you want the Sixers to kind of target in free agency or trade? Is it Paul George? Is it LeBron James? Is it Jimmy Butler? Is it Brandon Ingram? You've had some time to think about it. Let us know. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Or use the free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. Let us know your thoughts as the Sixers offseason is almost here. Less than a week to the draft, which means free agency opens June 30th. And we have it covered for you here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN.
It's with Mike Gill.
Keeping the fans entertained and happy.
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Little Jackson Brown to bring us back from the break on a Thursday. Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. Nick Earnshaw's here with Nick's Nuggets. Great movie, by the way, for Jackson Brown's Somebody's Baby. Now, 1982, I was 5, so I don't expect Earnshaw to know it. But classic movie, Earnshaw. What's the movie for Jackson Brown, Somebody's Baby? You know it?
I I don't know what movie it's from. I can't think of the movie that it would be from, Mike. I don't know. It's a little before, 80s, a little before my time. I mean,
It's like a cult classic. It's one of those like everybody knows. You know what? Right. At what time in our lives do the cult classics get cut off that the next generation they're not cult classics? Like in 1982, I was only 5, but I know the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Fast
hear
Times at Ridgemont High. Fast Times. Ridgemont High.
I gotcha.
Great movie. You got to watch it this summer. Jackson Browne's a great scene when that song comes on. Check it out. Give me a full review.
I will. I think I've seen that once. I'm pretty sure I've seen it once, maybe on television or something. You know, I come into the house and it's just on TV. I've probably seen it, but I do have to rewatch it. Listen, I got to get better with the movies. You know, the Schreiner on the weekends, he kills me for some of the stuff I haven't seen either, cartoons, etc. So I'm out of the loop on some of the older classics, I guess. It's not good for me.
I didn't do a better job. I'm not a big movie guy, but Fast Times is something that everybody out there listening, listen. Thursday, June 20th, I'm proclamating everybody needs to watch Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And on Monday, I want a full report. I'm giving you all the way through the weekend. And then Monday's Nuggets, I want a full report.
All right, that's what I'm going to do because I need to see this movie.
Oh, there's no Phils tonight. You can watch Fast Times.
I could. I got nothing going on. What do I do? I'm a dork anyway, so I'll watch it.
All right. Well, Knicks Nuggets are brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Yeah, we said no Phils tonight. So how many Nuggets we got today?
I still got a 3-pack for you, Mike. So, you know, I got to start with the Sixers, though. No Phils tonight. We'll get to the Phils in a little bit. I got one nugget on the Phillies I do want to hit with you, but I'll start with the Sixers. And the report out of The Athletic today with Brandon Ingram and the Sixers and the Pelicans. Pelicans apparently reached out to the Sixers about a possible trade for Brandon Ingram. And I want to talk about this because I know you've talked about Brandon Ingram a few times on the Bash. We've talked about it on the Nuggets segment, possibly him coming here, Sixers making a trade. I went over some of the numbers. He's got a $36 million cap hit and only 1 year of team control. Now, for the Sixers, I don't know if this makes much sense with what you want to do. I understand you got a window here about 2 to 3 years with Embiid, but I feel like if you're going to go out and trade your assets, right, those first-round picks you got back from the Clippers, Mike, you don't want to go after a guy like Brandon Ingram who has a big cap hit heading into this year, might mess up your plans overall during the offseason. He's got $36 million against the cap. They can still do other things. They do trade for him, but only that 1 year team control, you might not be able to sign him. Remember, you still got to sign Tyrese Maxey to his max extension. So this is an interesting one. I don't think the Sixers are going to be willing to do it, give up the assets for 1 year with Brandon Ingram. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the Sixers want to avoid going down the trade route if they don't have to. I think they would much rather do a clean deal, make the sign and keep their assets and be able to do other things. That would be Paul George would be at the top. And I think one of the reasons why Paul George is at the top is because he's a straight sign. You can sign him and you don't have to give up any draft picks. Now, you can use those draft picks for other ancillary moves, but I don't think they want to use those draft picks for the big move. I think they'd rather make this, because as we talked about Wednesday, was that yesterday? Yeah, yesterday, I think it was, when we talked about when you have the cap space, you have to use it. You know, use it or lose it, buddy. So they would like to use that to get a player and then use the assets to fill in around your Joel, your Maxey, and then potentially Paul George. They don't want to have to use the assets. Now, you could go the other direction. Use the assets to get the player, and then use the cap space to get the ancillary players. You could go that route too, but I think the other way is easier.
Yeah, I agree with that because, I mean, as much as I'm not the biggest fan of them bringing in Paul George, it just is going to make sense with where they're at in their situation, right? Because I think people would forget, you got to re-sign Tyrese Maxey, but you still have all that room. Do you want to give up those trade assets right now?
Maxey thing, we talked about this with Keith Smith on yesterday's show, and if you missed yesterday's show, go to the X platform. You can watch that conversation with Keith, but he mapped out the whole Maxey thing. You know, it's almost like a fait accompli.
Yep.
They'll sign him. He's restricted, but they're going to have to wait until after free agency because his cap situation they want to get that all ironed out before they sign him to alter their cap situation.
Right.
So he's going to get signed, but it's going to be a little bit down the road.
Yeah. He will be a Sixer though. He's not going anywhere. They're not going to let him walk. Just to be clear, they're not going to let him walk. But yeah, the Brandon Ingram thing is interesting because you look at all the other options out there, right? Like the Jimmy Butlers. Do you want to give up assets for a Jimmy Butler who's aging as well, right around the same age as Paul George? Like, I don't think that's the route they want to go. It's easier to sign Paul George and then use those assets on kind of the role players and figure out, all right, maybe we could trade for a guy over here or over there. I think that's what they'll use it for. I think they move that 16th pick. Remember, the draft's coming up. I think you're going to see a lot of noise during the draft. Remember, it's a 2-day event now, but the Sixers do have the 16th overall pick. I think they're going to trade that pick at some point.
Yeah,
I think it's going to get
definitely. I think they use that 16th pick to get immediate help. They've cleared out a ton of cap space to go and get the player they want. So if the right deal is available on draft night, I think 16 is used to try to improve the team. Now they understand you got Joel Embiid. Maxey is now entering, I think his fourth year. So you've got two, I want to say, younger veteran players. Embiid, I would say, is in like the last year of his younger veteran player. I know he's been in the league for like 10 years, but he's still under 30 years old. Right. So you have to go after it right now. And I think the 16th pick is a way that they could do that. I've seen some mock drafts out there. Jared McCain from Duke, I was reading in a mock draft this morning that, he's a guy that was a pretty good Duke a player at Duke, 16 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, made 41% of his threes, shot a lot of threes. So sounds good on paper, but can he help this team in 2024, 2025? Probably not.
Yeah, that's the thinking, right? Like, you go out and draft somebody, it's going to take a little bit for them to develop, right? Especially with how young the players are coming out. It's going to take time for them to be real contributors to an offense and a defense like the Sixers have right now. So, yeah, I just see them moving on from that pick. I just can't see them taking somebody and wanting to develop. Their goal is their windows right now. Their goal is to win right this second with Embiid. You don't know how much time you have left of MVP-level play from him. You're just going to re-sign Tyrese Maxey, who's entering probably the prime of his career now. And he just hasn't I don't even think he's hit his ceiling yet. So it's going to be fascinating to see what they do with the draft, what they do with that pick. The Ingram thing, I feel like it's just noise, and it's just the Pelicans trying to drum up interest to get off of that contract for this year. That's just what it seems like to me with the Pelicans. All right, I'll move to nugget number 2. And our question of the day, Mike, with the Sixers, what free agent we've heard Paul George. We've heard all the big names. What free agent do you want the Sixers to sign? I have one name in particular I'd love to see the Sixers sign because, you know me, I want them to go the route of adding all these role players, right? I want them to be a really deep team. And a player that I'm looking at is Malik Monk. Sacramento Kings last year. He did get hurt, but he was fantastic. Had one of his better seasons last year, averaged 15 points per game, shot 35% from 3, had nearly a 45% field goal percentage as well, and was second in Sixth Man of the Year voting. He did get hurt towards the end of the year, but I think he's a player that if the Sixers are able to get, he was the leader of that unit of the Sacramento Kings throughout the entirety of the season. And once he went down, they started dropping in the standings, and they missed him dearly coming down the stretch. I think Malik Monk could be an impact player for the Sixers' second unit. They need scoring. They need a guy who could give them energy, a veteran presence. I think Malik Monk could be an underrated signing if the Sixers do have enough space. Maybe if they sign Paul George, but that would be a role player I'd love to see the Sixers target and maybe sign this year. How about you?
I like that name. Yeah, I think and I like what you said too, as a guy off the bench, a guy that gives you a little bit of scoring punch off the bench. He's a guy that I think we talked about this maybe about a month or so ago, though. Not afraid of the big moment, not a guy who can, is not going to be afraid. We keep kind of asking the question about who is that Derek White that you can find. Who's the guy that can be your version of Derek White, who's just like a upper tier role player? And is that like a Malik Monk, a guy who, hey, your stars win, but you also have to be able to win a game when your stars don't have it. And who's that other kind of player that can get you 15 on a night when your star only gets you 18, right? And that Derek White has been that great. Drew Holiday. Can Malik Monk be a Drew Holiday type of player who can score some nights? He'll shoot the big three, plays, off the bench and does some things. I'm not saying he's going to be Drew Holiday because I think Drew Holiday's is at the top of his class when it comes to what he is. He's probably the best number 3 or 4 player going. He's the glue that keeps it all together. But I like Malik Monk's name as a player. We talked about with Keith Smith on yesterday's show, DeMar DeRozan, if you can kind of get him at an under market value, if he's saying, hey, I want to go to a team that I can win. Is he a player we would have interest in? I don't know how he fits in with Embiid and Maxey. He's more of a spot up shooter, not a 3-point guy. He takes a lot of short jumpers. But can you get that veteran player that could be, a scorer on some nights? Not every single night. DeRozan's a very good scorer, though. He would be kind of an intriguing piece there. The other guys, I think Nick Claxton is a guy that I have to keep an eye on, too. They need to get a big. And can they prioritize their big? The backup big is almost an extension to the starting team. Even if he plays 12 to 15 minutes, that guy's got to give you the best 12 to 15 minutes you can find. And I wonder if they can target and prioritize a player like Nick Claxton, who, he made a little bit under $10 million last year. What kind of raise is he going to get in free agency? And does he want to be a backup? Is someone going to throw a ton of money at him? That's a guy that I would be thrilled if they ended up with at the end of the thing. But I like Malik Monk as well. That's a good name by you.
Yeah, I think Monk, and Monk is younger, right? He's 26 years old. So he was drafted the same year Markelle Fultz was. I remember I was screaming when the Sixers were down in that draft around, the 9th or 10th pick before they traded back up to 3 and then traded to 1. I was like, Malik Monk should be a name they should look at with where they're at in the draft. So it would be pretty cool to see him come here. I think he would be a name off the bench. He's younger. He could give them something offensively. That's a name I like. You mentioned DeMar DeRozan. If they could get him at a discounted rate, that would be fantastic. He's like a top 10 player.
As a discounted rate, right? At a discounted rate. I'm not paying him, big time money. But if he says, look, I looked all around, there's no deal for me out there, and the Sixers have the most money and can say, hey, you're still on the market, you want to come here, then I think about it. I don't want to make him, though, the priority. That's all.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw. He was at a concert last night. Kendrick Lamar had a concert. I don't know if you've heard about the rap beef going on. He picked a side. I don't know if you saw that. I don't know if that'll factor in your decision.
I'm out on that whole I'm out on whose side is who on.
So Kendrick Lamar and Drake, I don't know if you've heard about the beef they've had. They've had a big beef.
I have heard about it, but I don't know the genesis of it, where, why, and all this stuff. I don't know it all.
It's gotten pretty nasty, to say the least. I mean, there were some bars in some of these rap songs that were out of pocket, in my estimation. But you had DeMar DeRozan out there last night, so I guess he's looking forward to free agency. He's going to let things go. I don't know if him picking a side, Mike, will have any bearing on if you want him to come to the Sixers. So
yeah, no bearing. I don't know who Kendrick Lamar is well enough. I have heard of Drake. I've heard of both of them, but I couldn't pick out a bar or a tune that either one of them sung.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So yeah, he was at a concert last night. Malik Monk, didn't see him at the concert. He wasn't on stage dancing with Kendrick during that concert. So Malik Monk, he could come to the Sixers. I'm cool with that. DeMar DeRozan, I don't know. It might draw up some different sides of the aisle right there. All right, final nugget. Phillies are off today, but the Diamondbacks are coming back to town, Mike. I got to ask you real quick. What will the reception be like? I know Cole Hamels is going to be his official retirement day with the Phillies in the first game. But remember, the Diamondbacks are the team that knocked the Phillies out last year. How much of a team are they more – how hated do you think they are? Do you think they're more hated than the Astros? Because of the past two teams that the Phillies have been knocked out by are the Astros and the Diamondbacks. Which team do you think Philly fans should hate more in your estimation?
Good question. Fair question. Diamondbacks coming in this weekend, first time in Philadelphia since they won the 2 games in Philly. I think they're going to get a pretty interesting reception here because I don't think the Philly fans forget that they did knock them out, and they did it here. And that's what I talked about yesterday, Aaron Shaw. 25-3 at home means nothing if you can't win the 2 games in October that you have in your own backyard. So I'm interested to see what kind of reception Arizona gets tomorrow night. By the way, that game is on Apple TV Plus. Sunday's game's on Roku. Yep. Do you have Roku?
No, I think I might get it just for Sunday. Remember, we talked about that. I don't know. I don't have Roku, so I have no idea. I have to look into it because I'm going to wake up and watch the baseball. I like the morning baseball. When you were in London, I enjoyed waking up.
I like the morning baseball too. Now, Josh is off today. He would be the guy that would do the research to find if Roku is free or anything, but we'll see. I think that – see, I don't look at Houston either as like this big rival because you don't play them ever. It's Atlanta. Right. Atlanta's the rival because of the 2 playoffs. I think they're number 1. And I don't know, like the Mets, maybe. Like the Mets just haven't been very good. Is there a number 2? Like, do you consider Houston because you played them in the World Series? Arizona, look, if they play again in the playoffs this year, then like like that might start something, but I don't think there's enough there. It's definitely Atlanta number 1. They don't even really have like, when you do the interleague, they don't really have like, can Baltimore become that? I don't know. You were down in Baltimore. The Baltimore fans are nice.
Yeah, they're nice people. I mean, I guess the Yankees, you would say if it were from the AL, right? I mean, it's the New York thing.
Yankees have Red Sox. Yankees have Mets. It's a Subway Series. You got Yankees, Red Sox. The Phillies would be a distance somewhere, if at all, on that list. I don't think the Yankee fans, quite frankly, care. Now, the Phillies are good. They played the World Series in 2009, but not much there. The Phillies, like, they don't have that. I mean, Baltimore could be it. If they are both good over the next 5 to 10 years here, and they're playing interleague, and they maybe get a World Series matchup, maybe that's your spark. Washington would be one, but Washington's been so bad.
Yeah, Washington's been bad. Miami really isn't that much. I mean, Atlanta's
Miami's got nobody. Yeah. Nobody cares about Miami.
Atlanta's really number 1, but like outside of the division, it's like, all right, do we really hate the Diamondbacks? I mean, the Phillies probably should have won. The Diamondbacks aren't that great this year. They're a half game out of the wild card. They're under 500. It'll be interesting to watch. But yeah, it's just something I think about because the Cardinals were kind of, because of what happened in 2011, they were kind of a team too that I guess you say when they got the revenge in 2022 in the wild card series.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. No, I tell you, that's one thing with baseball. It's a very, very regionalized sport, and because the Phillies are kind of in a situation where the Mets have the Yankees. You have Washington and Baltimore in that little, I'm sure down there, that's a pretty, big deal. But, the Phillies don't really have that team. So
no.
I would say it's Atlanta. And it's because they've played in the playoffs for 2 straight years, and the Phillies have beaten them there. By the way, pitching matchups for tomorrow on Apple TV Plus is Taijuan Walker. So you can at least say, hey, I don't have to watch Walker because he's on Apple TV Plus, although he's pitched pretty well those last 2 times out. The game that's actually on TV is Saturday afternoon. That's Wheeler and Henry. And then on Roku, Sunday at 11:35 a.m., Christopher Sanchez gets the start for Philadelphia. Arizona's going with Jared Montgomery. You remember Montgomery was the guy, Jordan Montgomery. So sorry, Montgomery was the guy that a lot of people wanted the Phillies to go out and sign. He signed late, and you're going to get to see him against Taijuan Walker.
Yeah, it'll be a fascinating series. Hamels is retiring officially as a Philly too on Friday night, so it should be good.
Apparently, Comcast Sportsnet or NBC Philadelphia is going to show the pregame festivities.
Okay, that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Jordan Montgomery 5-4, an ERA of 6, and a 163 WHIP. So thankfully, they stayed away from him.
Yeah, definitely. Say Blake Snell got off those slow starts too, so that was another name I was throwing out there.
There's the Nuggets.
3 nuggets for you today.
Hey, I enjoyed the 3-pack on this Thursday edition of Nick's Nuggets here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. We got a lot still to go, including a look at the Sixers offseason. Austin Krell, our Sixers insider from 97.3 ESPN.com, is going to join us coming up on the other side. Hey, I'm Mike Gill, and don't forget, if you're a contractor or a do-it-yourselfer, Progressive Fence and Railing has the region's largest selection of glass rail, cable rail, aluminum, composite, vinyl, T-railing, with delivery to your home or job site on time, on budget. or let the pros at Progressive install it for you. They'll plan your project, get you what you need when you need it. Visit ProgressiveFenceAndRail.com or one of their 4 locations. The Celtics win the NBA championship earlier this week. Should the Sixers change their offseason plan? We'll ask Austin that. Plus, which of their own free agents should they prioritize? That's all next. Stick around. More Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Austin Krell, 97.3 ESPN.com, Sixers insider. He'll be busy this offseason, and he's got a couple of things we want to pick his brain on as the official start of the NBA offseason is pretty much underway. You can start re-signing your own free agents. Free agency opens on the night of June 30th. And, of course, we'll have more on that July 1st when everything should start happening here. What could the Sixers' plans be? Let's start at the top, though, Austin. Are you keeping your eye on any of their current free agents and them returning back to Philadelphia? They got a lot of them. You got, of course, Oubre and Nick Batum and Kyle Lowry, Buddy Hield. There's a bunch of them. DeAnthony Melton, Cameron Payne. Any of these guys that you have your eye on with intrigue on whether the Sixers will make an announcement on in the coming days?
Hey, Mike. So I think the priority, it sounds like, is Nico Batum. As far as I understand, they're giving him his due space as he prepares for the Olympics. His trainer has said that he's preparing heavily for the Olympics. I don't know that he has made it clear to any of at least to the parties that I've talked to, whether he will retire after the Olympics or go back to the NBA for another season. But it seems as though, just from the things that are out there, like the Sixers would be the ones who would be most interested in him. He would, in theory, be he wouldn't go play for Charlotte per se, a team that is not in position to contend. That's sort of the main guy. Oubre, I have very little feel for. He did just sign an agent, which to me tells me he expects to have some level of bargaining power in the market when the free agency period opens. So I would anticipate at least, that there being, the Sixers are going to say, this is what we think you're worth. And he's either going to have the option of return or some team is going to pay him a lot more money than the Sixers are willing to give. Nothing would surprise me there. But I think the way that the order of operations definitively has to work is that it's your big fish first, it is your remaining cap room second, it is your exceptions and your minimums, and then it's you worry about the guys who you already have, which is to say Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's funny because they only have those two guys really on the roster. Everybody else is free, and they only have like two really signed players. I guess Paul Reed's an interesting story there that you could either kind of dive into a little deeper if you want, whether or not you think he'll be back here. I guess because they didn't get out of the first round, technically he could be gone too. So they can be a completely new roster, or you target your big time free agent and then kind of target the guys that you want to come back. But then you're kind of playing with fire if somebody else targets some of those guys.
Yeah, I think the Sixers are playing disruptor in some ways in this offseason. Like, you take the Clippers, for example, mostly because Paul George has been the name most linked to the Sixers. The Clippers are thinking, well, we set our ceiling when we signed Paul George, right? Like, we gave him less than max. No one on the team should dare expect that they're going to be worth more than Kawhi Leonard, given that, he is his cachet as a champion, what he's done. So as far as that goes, I think there is a lot of room to go for the Clippers and Paul George to negotiate a deal. Each day that goes by without a Paul George deal with the Clippers is a day closer to some percent increase in probability that the Sixers end up with Paul George when all is said and done. I do think it is monumentally important to include the fact that when the Sixers traded for traded James Harden, they got not one but 2 first-round picks back. They got one via the Oklahoma City Thunder. Protections on that, I haven't dug into that yet, but there is a 2028 first-round pick via the Los Angeles Clippers that is unprotected. And what that pick represents is a bet, essentially. The Sixers are saying, we dare you to pay all of James Harden, Paul George, and Kawhi Leonard, and that pick is you're going to be so done by 2028 that pick is going to be worth a lot, and we can get a lot for it. Or it's going to be to say, we have forced you to give up draft equity, significant draft equity, to acquire James Harden when they did that trade it feels like decades ago. And with that, it's hard for you to look yourselves in the mirror and say, we're cool with James Harden walking away after just one season, if it means keeping the core of Kawhi and Paul George together. So I think that deal and getting those 2 picks put them in a very good position to be a disruptor for the Clippers and other teams, frankly, if they're not willing to pay up for their stars. And the Clippers, in their own minds, are probably thinking, we're not so sure that anyone's going to be willing to fork over a max deal to Paul George at 34 with as little as he's proven, and whatnot. So we think we're in good position to retain him. Well, if the Sixers come out and say, we're willing to give a wing a max deal, as has been reported elsewhere, by the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Sixers are the disruptor here. They're saying, the Clippers are offering this. We will up that offer to 4 years and whatever million. So they have an opportunity here to be a significant disruptor in this free agent market. And from the conversations I've had over the last 2 days with people around the league, I think the Sixers feel like, we understand that we've underachieved and we've underperformed and we've disappointed our fans and this, that, and the other. We understand that, there's reasons to doubt Daryl Morey and Joel Embiid and whatnot, but we feel like this is the first year of the full vision and the first year that Daryl Morey has a real chance to spend his own assets, his own cap space, draft picks, what have you, to make that vision come to fruition. And, we can laugh at that and say he's had 4 years. He's also inherited Al Horford's contract, which he had to expend draft picks to get off of. He had to include draft picks to get off the Ben Simmons deal to get that trade request, accommodated. He had to do things to, he had to work around the Tobias Harris contract, which I think we can all agree did not pay dividends in the way that the Sixers had hoped. So they have this max space. They have all of this room. Around the league, the Sixers feel like this is a time for a lot of excitement given the opportunities they have.
Yeah, we had this discussion yesterday about whether or not Morey's done a good job. Has he been what you anticipated? And I tried to map out a lot of these things. I said, listen, people said, well, why didn't the Sixers make a move like the Drew Holiday deal or the Porzingis deal? And I said, well, quite frankly, they didn't really have anything to make those types of moves. But like why I said I don't think Morey has been great. I say he's been about a B because he's had to untangle a lot of mess. Now you hold his feet to the fire because he untangled things and got himself to a position to be judged.
It's why he got an extension in the middle of this season that aligns with Nick Nurse's contract. They're saying, okay, now you no longer have to expend draft assets to get off bad contracts. You no longer have to deal with other financial constraints on long-term commitments we've made. That's a very nice way of saying Tobias Harris looking at you. So with that, we can argue about whether Daryl's done a good job. I personally believe he has done a good job and untangled a lot of mess. With that comes major responsibility. This is the first year of his new vision, and the Sixers felt strongly enough about him to extend him, to give him that contract extension. And they're going to have, we can talk about the Celtics having the flexibility, the agility, the assets to go get a Kristaps Porzingis, to go get a Drew Holiday. Well, guess what? They had to go and draft a Marcus Smart and develop him into the player he became, to go and use that chip to get Porzingis. They had to have draft assets to go and get Drew Holiday. And, they had to use, obviously, Malcolm Brogdon, who they traded for, or they acquired, and then also, Robert Williams, who they drafted. But they also had picks to use. And the Sixers, because of the constraints on trading picks, you can't trade picks up to you can't trade consecutive first round picks. You cannot trade picks more than 7 years into the future in the NBA. So there were literally league imposed constraints to what he had to work with in his first couple of years in Philadelphia to make significant moves. And this is the first off season where he can make a significant move. The only chip he really had was Ben Simmons at the time, which he tried to cash in on, didn't work, and then it completely fell apart when Ben Simmons collapsed in playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the Ben Simmons thing, too, I mean, that was not something that he was really a part of. It just kind of fell into his lap, so he ended up having to do that. And then people said, well, he ended up with James Harden, and then he perpetrated that problem. I would say, yeah, fine. You want to blame him for for going to get James Harden? Sure, I don't have a problem with that. But I thought he also did a pretty good job of getting return for Harden once Harden decided to be a malcontent.
Yeah, like I said, those two picks he got back for Harden, I think, and I'll write the story, in the coming days. I think if the Sixers end up with Paul George, we're a major, major domino effect in that all happening, because the Clippers are staring at that CBA and they're saying that new second apron scares the daylights out of us, and we don't want to be inflexible as a team. We have this money committed to Kawhi Leonard. We just traded 2 first-round picks less than a year ago for James Harden. We have to pay him. And given what the current environment is in the NBA, given the constraints of the current CBA that's going to be in place, their thinking is clearly their thinking is we don't feel like being, show me the money with Paul George, and that opens up the door for the Sixers to be like, hey, we need a wing who is a star level player who can create his own shot. So I don't know if that was the Sixers thinking at the time, but I do think that there is a domino effect at play here, where the Sixers forced the Clippers to put so much equity into getting James Harden that it's now as if you wonder if Paul George is the odd man out.
Austin Krell covers the 76ers for 97.3 ESPN.com. Paul George is the biggest name. Is there any other of the secondary free agents or even the top-level free agents that you think are in play or worth diving deeper into?
So I think there are a couple. Like, we can talk about Mikal Bridges and, Brandon Ingram and whatnot. I think Ingram poses an interesting scenario, mostly because he does not have many years left on his deal. So he is playing for a new contract. And when you're playing for a new contract, as Kelly Oubre was with this coaching staff and with this team, you can you have a little bit of cachet to whisper in their ear, hey, if you want to get that big pay, you want to look your best here, this is what you got to do. Ingram is not a volume three-point shooter in New Orleans. He's a very mid-range heavy guy. He has a high release point on his jumper. That makes him inherently somebody who is going to take difficult, inefficient shots. I think maybe you can coax more threes out of him. And if he's willing to take more threes, he hits them at a high clip, that suddenly becomes a more valuable wing player for you. And guess what? If you don't like what you're getting out of him, you don't have to re-sign him. You can simply sign and trade him, let it walk, and basically kick the can down the road. If it pays massive dividends in year one, okay, then you have him already under your umbrella. You can re-sign him. People talk about Mikal Bridges and Lauri Markkanen guys. I think the danger with the Mikal Bridges is that Brooklyn's mindset, if they're trading him, is we're not interested in contending. We are interested in rebuilding. And when you're in that mindset, you are thinking about, I don't really care what the Sixers want. I don't care about sending this guy to the Sixers. I care about drumming up as much value as I can from my best player. and starting a bidding war of draft picks. And then you're going to have teams like Oklahoma City in the mix. Teams that teams like Houston have a lot more draft equity that they can spare to go and get a Mikal Bridges if they so choose. And that's when I think the Sixers can get priced out of the market. With Lauri Markkanen, he's the ideal fit in terms of being a stretch four. I think he is somebody who I have questions about, if only because, number one, he's only, he played for the, he started out with the Bulls. They were not a very good organization. He had trouble there, goes to Cleveland, gets a little bit better there, but still not great. Really flourishes in Utah in a scenario where there's not much at stake. So I do wonder if, is that guy more a capitalizer on a low-stakes environment, capitalist on a low-stakes environment, I should say. But his skill set is the perfect skill set. I also think, Danny Ainge is going to want every single draft pick you have to get Lauri Markkanen. So I think, there's realistically 5 or 6, maybe 7 guys you can talk yourself into as being, viable on the list. But I think it's pretty clear the Sixers, top 2 or 3, it's Paul George, number 1, it's LeBron, and it's Jimmy Butler, if all else fails.
All right. I saw you post something at X, at NBA Krell. A lot of people said, look, the Dynasty Celtics, this team's going to win again, and that maybe the Sixers need to change course and go into a different direction. Any thoughts of that being a possibility?
From what I've gathered recently, I don't think they plan on. I don't think giving Joel Embiid his extension is the forefront of their mind. And I'm not sure whether that'll happen this summer. That isn't something that goes away. But I don't know that as soon as Joel is extension eligible, that he's going to get his extension. I do believe that Tyrese Maxey will get his. That'll be the last piece of business, just in order to correctly do the order of operations under the CBA. I think you look at this team from from where they stand, they want to be in position where they're selling prospective players on Tyrese and Joel will be here long term. And I do think it was important to them that Joel went on NBA Countdown a couple Fridays ago next to Paul George. Looks very happy, says he's excited about the future. So as long as you have Joel, who is going to be 31 towards the end of this season, and whether he can stay healthy, if you have a magic 8 ball, let me know. His health is the biggest thing in all of this. But as long as you have him and his skill set, as long as you have Tyrese Maxey, who it seems to be blooming into an All-NBA player at age 23. You have Max Tapface this summer to add a third piece if that is the route you so choose. I think there is a lot of reason to be optimistic about this team's prospects going forward, because Boston looks great. They look unbeatable. They beat Dallas, who was not a very great team. In the finals 4-1. We all knew that Boston was going to be in this position. They were 64-18, whatever it was. They were all season long. They were lined up to be in this position, and they capitalized. They won the title. I don't think them winning one championship should be what sways you into believing that it's time for a Sixers rebuild. I also think you look at Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and say they are 26 and 27 years old. If you were to rebuild right now and trade Joel today, hypothetically, you're looking at a 5-year window where you're not 3 or 4 or 5 year window where you're not competitive as you try to figure out your rebuild. Okay, and you're ready to go. Those guys are 31 and 32. They're not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. Those guys are still young enough. They are not going anywhere. Boston can shape-shift that core around them. Now, I would look at it from the perspective of this. The CBA is going to make Boston make some decisions in the near future about Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday, Derek White. Al Horford probably retires in the next 1 to 2 years. Realistically, they have another 2 years, maybe at least, to contend. But for right now, I think it is not all said and done in the East for the next decade. They're not a dynasty. They have won exactly one title. They have won one title. Their road to get there was not the strongest road when all was said and done. That is not to discount them, but it was not the strongest road to get there.
Joel hinted at that.
Correct. And so my mindset as someone who covers the NBA would be, look, you only get so many Joel Embiids in the NBA, guys who are consensus top 10 players, top 5 players, two-way dominant stars. As long as you have that guy, as long as he is bought into you, as long as he is healthy and in his prime, you have to go for it because you have absolutely no idea what could break your way in any given year.
Any interest in Klay Thompson?
Klay Thompson's skill set is obviously very interesting. His age worries me tremendously if he's looking for a maximum deal. I would say he is far down on my list, like below DeMar DeRozan, maybe at that level of a guy. Like just because he's lost not just one but many steps defensively.
Go ahead. Yeah, is there a big man? I know Drummond's name always seems to come up since he's been gone, but is there a big man that you would have your eye on?
Well, as the Philadelphia Inquirer reported, they're looking at a big man who could back up Joel. I think the problem with using the big man as a position of draft is that big man and point guard are the two hardest positions to play as a rookie. And so I think you have to look, if you're looking for immediate impact, you're looking at free agents, maybe that's Andre Drummond. Paul Reed's contract is not guaranteed. They could use that in a salary moving trade if they desired to. They could also say, hey, we like Paul Reed. Why not see why not see what growth there is left there and continue to build on him? If you ask me, I think that he was not properly used in the playoffs. They used him in a drop coverage. He is not a traditionally sized big man, so that made him look worse. I think he should be used in a more switch-oriented scheme defensively, and Nick Nurse did not do that. So our last memories of Paul Reed are not great, but I think maybe he's a guy who you waive and then re-sign at a lower number, or if there's a trade or if you think you have a guy like Andre Drummond available to you, maybe you use Paul Reed to trade.
All right. Well, it's going to be interesting, and it all starts right after the draft, which is next Wednesday, June 26th, and you can hear that right here on 97, at least the first round.
And we will be there in person. We will be there live from Sixers HQ.
Very cool. Yes, and we'll be catching up with Austin as soon as free agency opens on Monday, the 1st. That actually starts on the Sunday night, but we're not on the air Sunday night. So Monday, we will be live with a free agent preview of everything that happens. Austin Krell at NBA Krell. Check him out and follow him this offseason for all the Sixers news and draft night. Thank you, Austin.
Thank you.
Great job, man. Awesome stuff there. There you go. A little preview of what Austin's looking at as we get ready for that. He's going to be at the draft. We'll talk to him draft night. That is on Wednesday the 26th. And, of course, he will be live in studio for a free agent special on Monday, July the 1st. That's right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.
You're listening with Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
On 97.3 ESPN.
All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Download the app in the Apple Store, Google Play. I'm Mike Gill. No Phils tonight, but they do have a weekend series coming up. It's a rematch of the NLCS with the Diamondbacks. So I wanted to take this time to do a little state of both these teams. Will they be the two teams that are back in the NLCS yet again? Now, the Diamondbacks have really struggled this year. This is a team that has had some injury issues. Take a look at the standings right now. Obviously, the Phillies are way out in front. I say way out in front. We talked about this yesterday. They're only 7 up on Atlanta right now. 3 games have been chopped off of the Phillies' lead. I think it got as high as 10. It's now 7 over Atlanta. But when you take a look at Arizona, I think about this time last year, you're probably not thinking about Arizona. but they are a half game out of the playoffs right now. If the playoffs were to start today, your wild cards would be Atlanta. You ready for number 2? Washington. The Nationals are the wild card team right now. You know who the other one is? St. Louis. Atlanta, Washington, St. Louis, they're your wild cards. San Diego's a half game out. Arizona is a half game out. You know who else is a half game out? Pittsburgh. I mean, they've got this young little team down there in Pittsburgh now. Phillies are going out to Pittsburgh in about a month from now. So you'll see that Pirate team. Cubs are a game out. Giants are a game out. The Mets are a game out. The Reds are a game and a half out. That is your National League wild card right now. So Arizona is just kind of in the muck with all of these teams. They beat the Nationals over the week. This week they had a set with the Nationals, and they lost the game yesterday. But I think they won that series out there. No, they're finishing that series. I guess today, right? They're finishing that series today. So the Nationals and the Diamondbacks. So you got the Diamondbacks coming to Philadelphia after playing in Washington. So they're on this little East Coast trip here. So where are these two teams now? Well, Arizona 36-38 on the season. And you take a look at why. They went out and signed. You're going to see him pitch tomorrow night, Jordan Montgomery. They went and got him this offseason. That was a guy that had pitched for the Rangers, him and Snell. Both those two sat out on the free agent market, which, by the way, it doesn't seem like a good blueprint for the future, is sitting this out. But Montgomery was one of their big signings that Brandon Pfaadt, remember, you faced him in the playoffs last year. He has been just okay this year, 3-6 with a 4.36 ERA. Zach Gallen has been solid this year. Jordan Montgomery, who they signed. Ryan Nelson has been not very good. Slade Ciccone, you'll see in the series against the Philadelphia Phillies. Their starting pitching has not been really good. Now, they've had some injury issues. We talked about the injuries that they have had to try to overcome. Merrill Kelly, who's kind of their number 2, he's only pitched in 4 games all season long. Kevin Ginkel, remember him? You certainly remember him from the playoffs last year. Their bullpen, which was so good last year. Sewald. The Diamondbacks are starting to kind of find their place. But I think when you look at them, their pitching, their bullpen really was what carried them in that Phillies series. But the lineup for them, you were not all that, worried about. Well, the lineup, I think, for them is starting to come around. Corbin Carroll, who was the Rookie of the Year last year, he's having a terrible year to start things off. He's been hurt. He's only hitting .218 with 2 home runs. Marte has been very good this year. Christian Walker hitting with a lot of power. Gurriel, who they re-signed in free agency. Suarez is not having a very good year. Jock Peterson they added in free agency. Jake McCarthy is a guy that has been linked to the Phillies a little bit in trade talks. This Arizona team is not the same as it was last year, but I think when you see them in town this week, you're going to start to see a team that's starting to kind of get the pieces together and get themselves back together. So it's going to be a fun Friday, Saturday, Sunday at Citizens Bank Park. When you take a look at, Alec Thomas, you remember Alec Thomas was a big player. He's been out. He is kind of taking it slow in returning. So this Diamondback team coming in here is definitely not the same that you saw in October that went to the World Series last year, but they're kind of building themselves back to get there. So I think it's a very interesting weekend at Citizens Bank Park with them coming in. Unfortunately, Friday night, the game's on Apple TV Plus tomorrow, and on Sunday, the game's on Roku. I got to figure out about that Roku thing. But one of the things, we talked about with Nick Earnshaw back during the Nuggets about an hour ago was where Arizona, after beating the Phillies, kind of falls on the list of teams in terms of rivalries. And I was thinking about it over the last hour, and I still can't come up with one that kind of tops Atlanta. And this version of the Diamondbacks coming in, I do think the Phillies fans are going to be amped up. And we'll talk more about this tomorrow. Mike McGarrett will be here, Bob Wankel. I think the Phillies fans will be amped up for Arizona coming back. but it's just not the same team. Right now, it's not the same team. Corbin Carroll, as I mentioned, he's been kind of banged up. He's not the same guy right now. He's only hitting like 210, 215, something like that. So they just haven't been the same. But it will be kind of an interesting home test for the Philadelphia Phillies. It will be. So if I'm ranking, as I was, Nicker asked the question during Knicks Nuggets today about who the Phillies kind of rivals are. And I was thinking, so I think I would rank it as, if I'm doing the biggest rivals for the Phillies, okay, I would say it's definitely Atlanta number one. Now, he brought up the Astros. Is anybody out there look at the Astros as a rival to the Phillies, all because they beat them in the World Series 2 years ago? I don't think so. So who's the next group? Right? It's Atlanta to me is far and away number one. But I told him, like, one of the things I look at here is the interleague play thing. For instance, the Cubs have the White Sox, right? Cincinnati and Cleveland, they're both in the same state. So I'm sure when they play against each other, there might be a little something there. You've got St. Louis and Kansas City, both from the same state. So they might have a little something in interleague play. And then I guess you take a look at, the Dodgers and the Angels. They're both in the L.A. area. You got the Giants and the A's, both in the Bay Area there. So there's at least, like, geographic rivalries there. In the eastern side, Mets and Yankees, Baltimore and Washington. I mean, if you want to throw Tampa and Miami because they're in the same state. But Philadelphia just doesn't really have that. Nothing's really grown from Phillies, Boston. Nothing's there, I think, with the Phillies and the Yankees. I think the Yankees really have more Red Sox and the Mets. So the Phillies, if anything, would even be third on that list. And I don't even know if they fall in the third spot. So when I look at the Phillies, like, geographic rivalries, the one that I think could be budding is a Phillies-Orioles. Can you get a Phillies-Orioles thing kind of going here? The crowds in Philadelphia, in Baltimore for the Phillies game against the Orioles last weekend, they were outstanding. But the problem has been they don't play down in Baltimore all the time. Can you get something going where the Phillies and Orioles kind of become something much like these other interleague cross? Now Phillies and Pirates, that's never really caught on. The Pirates just haven't been very good. I think Phillies Nationals could possibly be something if those two teams were good. There seemed to be a little something there for a little while back when the Phillies were good, and then Washington was getting better. But they really haven't been good at the same time. Now Washington's in the playoffs right now. If the playoffs were to start, I don't think that's going to hold. Phillies Mets should be bigger, but the problem with Phillies Mets is, as like all the things, when the Phillies are good, the Mets haven't been. They really haven't been good together, and that's been one of the problems there. So as Arizona comes in this weekend, to answer back to Knicks Nuggets about an hour ago, I don't look at this as much of a rivalry here. I don't see this as something. No, I do think the Phillies fans will remember. I do think the Phillies fans will remember that they came here and won the last two times they played, and that's going to be fresh. That's going to be something. I think the Philly fans are going to let them know that, hey, we remember you coming here. Now, what that means, who the heck knows? It's the first time they'll play since. They play 3 here, and then the Phillies will go to Arizona in the second half of the year. In like early August. I think they have a 4-game set. Let me pull that up. Yeah, August 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th. They got a 4-game set out in Arizona. So they play 7 times, but again, I don't know. And by the way, late in August, mid-August, Phillies are at Tampa for 3, at Miami for 3, at Boston for 3. Long road trip again. And then at the end of the year, the Phillies do have tough road trips. Milwaukee for 4. They got to go to Colorado, who's not very good. They got Houston for 3. They got San Francisco for 3. But that's way, way, way down the line. So with Arizona coming in, we've got a rematch of the NLCS coming to Citizens Bank Park this weekend. No Phils tonight. It is kind of a, not having the Phils like your best friend that just kind of hangs out with you all the time. They're not there tonight. It's like when your friend's parents say, "Hey, you're not going to hang out with your friend tonight. You're having dinner with us." That's what it kind of feels like tonight, right? Yesterday, the Phillies had an afternoon game, and tonight you got no Phils. So it's like my best friend has kind of let me down the last 24 hours. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. This whole baseball season has been a lot of fun with the Phillies jumping out. I saw Mike Missinelli on the Mike Missinelli podcast I was listening to the other day, who suggested that it's almost been boring because the Phillies are so good. I don't know if I agree with that, because I think this Phillies team has been fun. The crowd has been into it. I like the fact that the Phillies fans are kind of letting their guard down a little bit, and they're having fun with this team. It's like one thing if the Phillies are way out, I think we're like 25 games over 500, and they're not having fun with it. I think the Phillies fans are having fun with it, but as I cautioned yesterday, how much longer can that be? Like, how much longer can the daycare keep pouring water on the guy getting it? It's fun right now, but I don't know. Do those guys get to an age where they're not the guys dumping water on anybody anymore? Does it get to a point where they're like, hey, this isn't, it's like the Dancing on My Own. At what point do they say, okay, that's enough of the song? Is Dancing on My Own going to come back? Who knows? But I was listening to Mike's podcast, and we'll have to try to get Mike on the show again here soon. He had a podcast out. I got to might have been a week or so ago. Let me bring up his podcast page and see when that was. I try to listen to Mike's podcast each week. He puts a couple of them out, and the topic was whether or not the Phillies season was boring. He says the Phillies are so good they're boring, that they played so well lately that they become almost boringly good. I see what he's saying, but I think the fans are enjoying it, though. I do. I think the fans are finally enjoying a baseball team that is out in front, that's not sloshing through the season and where you're picking through every single problem trying to get to a wild card berth. Like last year, you were out of the race by now, and you're just like trying to get through that wild card. And yeah, every day was kind of like, all right, let's look at the wild card standings. All right, you're 2 up, they're 1 back, he's 3 out, blah, blah, blah. No, I think people are actually having fun with this team. ESPN.com did their power rankings. They came out, which it's just interesting to see. And they came out earlier this morning. The Yankees are now number 1. Philadelphia is number 2, which I actually think is kind of unfair to Baltimore, because I think Baltimore, who just beat you 2 out of 3, probably should be number 2 at this point. But, hey, Philadelphia 2, Baltimore 3, L.A. 4. The L.A. thing's interesting because Yamamoto, who had so much fanfare, he gets hurt. Betts gets hurt. Both are out several weeks. I think a lot of people just thought it was a fait accompli that the Dodgers were just going to just blow through, and they are. They're 46-30, and they're going to win that division going away. But I don't know that the Dodgers are a clear favorite in the National League like many people thought at the beginning of the year. Cleveland's number 5. The Brewers are number 6. Seattle's number 7. Atlanta is number 8. Kansas City's number 9. And at number 10, you got Minnesota. So just not a lot of depth in baseball right now. So are the Phillies so good they're boring? I don't know that I agree with that. I think the league is kind of boring. And in a boring league, you're one of the exciting teams. In a boring league, you're having fun. In a league that is kind of infested with mediocrity, the Phillies have been the bug repellent. They have been the team that's like, hey, while everybody's over here kind of sloshing through, we're going to do our own thing over here and make this fun. We're going to do our own thing and have a good time. We're going to do our own thing and make this season as fun as it can be. Now, at the end, I said yesterday, I cautioned, if it crashes and burns and you don't win, it could be the start of apathy. Of, we've been here before, we'll start to believe you when we get there. Right? If they don't do what people are anticipating, it's going to be a tough crash. But I do like the fact that the season, people are embracing the season and having fun with the season. I do like that. I do like the fact that people are like, you know what? Forget it. Let's just dive into this season. Let's go every night. Let's have a blast. Let's celebrate every homer. Let's celebrate every come from behind win, which you should. That's what sports are. I hate that we've gotten to a point that what happens in the playoffs is all that matters. Right? We've gotten to a point where you're not allowed to enjoy the regular season. And whatever happens in the regular season, I don't care. And it's fair to some extent, but it's almost like being a wrestling fan, right? I know there's a lot of people out there that look down upon the wrestling fans. But what makes the wrestling fan a wrestling fan is they know it's a scripted situation. They allow themselves to suspend disbelief. I'm going to suspend disbelief to be entertained by this product because I like the characters. I like the storylines. And I do like the fact that there is some sort of athleticism that has to be performed in a scripted environment. It's the same with the Phillies and sports. Is I want to suspend the disbelief that I might have. Is, do I have good enough outfield offense? I don't know in the playoffs, but right now I'm enjoying it. And that has been lost from sports. Oh, the guy's hitting .330. Well, can he do it in the playoffs? Of course that's the question, but you are allowed to enjoy what you're watching at the moment, in the moment. 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and you can get the app in the Apple Store or Google Play. We got, holy mackerel. It's been a long day today. No Josh today. Josh had the day off, so flying kind of solo. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And Josh should be back tomorrow, and we'll be back tomorrow. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City will be here. We'll take a look at that Phillies and Diamondbacks series. Bob Wankel from RedOctoberPhilly.com. Football at 4 tomorrow. Adams in the house. All that and more here on a Friday edition. Happy Hour Friday tomorrow. After this Thursday show, no Josh, I feel like happy hour for me, right? Oh, boy. All right, so no Phils tonight. Thanks to Nick and Moshe and Austin and Paul for jumping on board today on the Sports Bash. Back tomorrow right here on 97.3 ESPN. And don't forget, download the free mobile app in the Apple Store or Google Play. Have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you on a happy hour Friday tomorrow.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.